All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Indian Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation and Treaty 3 territory. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me are Tracy Anderson and Valerie Werhun. The assessor today is Jeremy Pohl, and the administrative personnel is Fran Picotto. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that the comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, then applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application be brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 9 on the docket today. Ms. Picotto, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Jeremy Ryan Pohl.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Trevor Scott.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right. Let me just start by saying there's going to be a number of issues that are in common for all these properties, so we'll deal with those in detail, I guess, in with the first property, and then not have to go into detail on the rest of the properties. So, Mr. Pohl, you can begin. The first property is 3965 Portage, Unit 10. So you can begin on that.
Sure. Roll number is 0756903320. Unit 10, 3965 Portage Avenue. The 2025 assessed value is for $4,883,000. It's taxable class 60. You look at the property on page 4, shows that it's segmented. We have the dealership to the north, and to the south we have a Tim Hortons. My understanding is that Tim Hortons isn't going to be in contention as far as the rent or any of the parameters other than capitalization rate. So I'll slim down on that argument. But it is 2 separate entities that occupy the site. It is owner occupied. As far as the car dealership, the Tim Hortons is a tenant. So, and if you look, you can see how the cars are parked. There's an actual fence line that breaks up the 2 properties. You cannot go one side of Tim Hortons and get into the auto park or get into the lot. I think it's completely separate. You go back to page 1. The square foot areas are as such. The building was built in 2004, and again, the Tim Hortons was built in 2012. Page 2 is the income and expense questionnaire. Page 3 highlights the expenses, that it is partially owner occupied, and then so summarize the Tim Hortons expense. If we can turn to my page It would be following page, it would be page 7. I believe I have it mislabeled as page 1. I apologize, the heavy flow, but it's order number A 02223. This is an old order from the municipal board indicating how they value or how to value car dealerships. And I'll go into a bit of the argument before we get into the argument, the order now. All the car dealerships are owner occupied. There is no renting market. So it'd be very difficult for us to go out and actually summarize what a rent would be, because they don't exist. Typically, it's a complete owner occupied property marketplace. So what we looked at was what rents would we put into the market? What place would we use by economic substitution? So we would look to go out into the marketplace in retail nodes and retail areas of near malls and look to see what a similar property would rent for. And look to see what those rents would be and bring them back to the subject properties. Now, subject properties are built out as a car dealership, obviously. It's a slab on grade construction, masonry walls, showroom area, office area, mezz area for their operations. Obviously, vehicle service garage selling, storage on site for what they sell. We would need to go out and look at a similar building. The most similar building is big box store type buildings, which are slab on grade, usually steel or masonry walls, steel roof, has usually mezzanine areas, for office space. There's a component for that, and then usually a loading dock of some sort towards the back to get your product in. And they're on retail areas, retail space out front for parking. This is the most similar orange to the apple kind of thing. It's not, you can't compare apples to apples. We have to compare an orange to an apple, so to speak. So this was reviewed long before I started doing this, and when we went through the order, when we were looking back, order number A02223 kind of gives us guidance from the municipal board on how to value that. So on page 11 of the order, and page 11 would be the actual order number on the page. Up at the top, it'll be the file number, and in the middle it'll be page numbers to the order. So it's on page 11 highlighted in red box around it, and this is the main focus, and I'll read it. The board's findings is this appropriate value to use the subject or to value the subject property is the income approach. There was an argument presented 20 plus years ago that should it be a cost approach? Is it a specialty use property? Is it create a special utility to the property owner? That has been explored some years ago, and the argument was no, the income is the most applicable approach to present. From that, where do you go into the marketplace? This particular point speaks to capitalization rate. Capitalization rate is incumbent of all things attached to it to make up an NOI, which would be your rent, which would be your vacancy, which would be your expenses, to come to the NOI and cap that. So what they chose was, I'll read it for you now.
Sorry, what page are we on, Jeremy?
Page 11 of the order, highlighted in red.
It's like that.
You didn't print it. Yeah, you didn't print it in color, did you? It's expensive. In black for you then. So on page 11 of the order itself, the board accepts the argument that auto malls and agglomeration of auto dealerships located in different sectors of the city result in auto malls having similar or having characteristics similar to regional retail with national rather than local tenants. What they mean is not the smaller time tenant, not the small time business owner, an actual national tenant, big tenant, chain tenant. The board is satisfied that subject is similar, although not identical, to large national and international retail properties located in or near regional shopping facilities. So you don't have to be in a mall. You have to be in or near a retail mall or a retail node or power center, however you want to phrase it now. But those are the type of properties that they're looking to. And then the board, level order of the capitalization rate at the time was, I guess, 10.5 at short 4.5. So basically, or $4.5. So basically, what they were saying is this problem's been looked at prior. 20+ years ago has been looked at prior. This market has been owner occupied. As far back as I've researched it. Every time a rent that comes up, it looks like it's a good rent or might be a good rent. It might be a holdover or purchase agreement to move into this marketplace. There is no marketplace that rents here. It's not even predominantly, but it is, its totality is owner occupied. So this argument obviously was heard a number of decades ago. And this is what the municipal board gave us for directive, is what type of properties they're looking at for economic substitution from where those rents are to the subject properties such as themselves. So when you're looking at these big box stores, they're very basic. You're looking at it from a construction build-up standpoint. Floor, you put your retail goods inside. Like I said, you have obviously your frontage to the store, you need windows, you need area up front of the store for parking and shoppers. Inside the store, you have a mezzanine area, usually you have a loading dock, and it's just basically a big open space with a steel roof and steel concrete solid brick construction. So that rate of return that owners need to develop a store for those tenants should be at least, if not more, at a subject property of a car dealership. Car dealership build-out is greater, is more. So a rate of return that you would need if you're covering the cost of developing it for the tenant would need to be more. Your showrooms are much better, higher cost to build. Your rest of the car dealership is going to be greater than basically a big empty warehouse, or I should say of those kind of spaces located at retail centers. So from that point, I looked to the marketplace, and this changed from a couple of years ago, or a couple cycles ago, where we were having an argument of, I did the citywide look, and then we look at about 25 or so comps. What I did for this cycle is we broke that out. We looked it into a bit of a deeper dive. Some of this was preparing for the municipal board test case that is going to happen in June, I believe. To look at where we can get specific about the areas in the city that car dealerships are located, and then also have a citywide look. So what you see on pages, starting on page 3, page 6 is the market for big box stores in retail locations, similar to our nearby, like the order indicated. And I broke them out to exactly where they are. They are at Regent, they are at St. James, Eric Cole Park area, they're on Pembina, they're on Kenniston Commons, and they are on your McPhillips area, and then the one we're dealing with here is on Unicity area and Portage area. So that would be on page 6. So I'm not gonna go through 80 comparables, but I just want to give the scope of what the department did, what I did for these particular properties. So we looked through 80 comparable properties for big box argument. And we looked at about almost 1.9 million square feet of inventory. And the total average weighted average for the rents were 1840. The average was 1878 and the median was 1825. So we have a very tight marketplace. If you're going to lease out in a retail location, stores such as this, you're paying around $19, just under $19, give or take, citywide. So if the property owners here decided that they did not want to become, or did not want to be owner occupied, where would they be able to go into the marketplace and lease out a building that's similar? Well, they would have to go into these retail locations, they'd have to go into these places, and the current market is paying around $19 or so square foot. So for them to develop a property similar to what they have now under appeal now, they would need to get at least that, and most likely somewhat more to make up for whatever particular buildup that they would need, for their showroom, that they would need for their dealership, that they would need for their branding. Anything that would be affixed to the property would be borne by, or cost borne by the property owner. That would naturally be at a higher rate than what we see now. So when we get to that specific of Unicity area, just just a little west, I would say. I think it's about 1.3 kilometers west. Mistaken. Is comp 73 to 80. They have an average rent of $17.78, weighted average of $17.08, and $17.38 per meeting. So again, a nice tight result there. So from that point, we've established what the rent would be. Now we go to what the actual workups are for the dealership, which is just after the order. And I apologize, my page numbers are off a little bit. I usually catch this, I didn't catch this, a couple documents went by before I got it. They were corrected in the picture. On the subject property for the vehicle dealership, we have a rent applied of $13.67. So I feel that the market rent that we have, we would naturally have to be around the $17 mark or greater than for the subject property at $13.67. I don't see an argument. So I'd say would be that it is a fair model rate applied. It's a bit under market. So the $17.11, or sorry, for the 17,111 square feet, we applied 13.67. That gives us a PGI of 233,907. The vacancy at 2% gives us effective gross income of $229,229. And I'll stop there at the vacancy for a moment. There is some argument that it should be a retail vacancy. I do generally going to put all retail parameters on it, and that's pretty much what our position will be at the municipal board. I do believe that, but for this appeal, I wouldn't be suggesting the $13.67 rent. So for me to increase the vacancy, I think it's unwarranted because you're already getting a lower rent. If I'd be putting the retail vacancy on it at somewhat higher than 2%, I would be looking to put a rent on higher, obviously of around $17 or greater. So at that point, I don't think there's any need to adjust that parameter for myself. I'll leave that up to the board's decision. From there, the effective gross income again is $229,229. Our expenses non-recoverable at 3% and shortfall of $6 gives us a net operating income of $220,299 and capped at 5.75% gives us $3,831,000 rounded. That's the car dealership. On the next page over is the Tim Hortons. I'll read the information into the so it's on record, but I don't believe there's any argument other than the cap rate for this. So we have a Tim Hortons here. It's 2,248 square feet. We have $29.04 applied. That gives us PGI of $65,282. We have a 4% vacancy rate applied to that, which gives us effective gross income of $62,671. Expenses at 3% non-recoverable and shortfall at $9 gives us a net operating income of $59,982. Capped at 5.7% gives us $1,052,000 rounded. And on the next page over, it shows a summary of the income streams in totality. So that's how you get back to the $4,880,000. With that, questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned in the beginning of the hearing, there is a lot of commonality, obviously, between the properties here and the issues involved, and obviously the questions. So as you had mentioned, I will have questions. I'll have basically all of them for the first property, and if we can carry those questions and answers forward for the remainder of the properties, that would be great. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Mr. Cole, I guess to start with, you had referred to a municipal board decision that you had included in your brief.
Yes.
A-02-223.
Correct.
And that particular board order is from 2022, or sorry,
No,
2002.
2002,
Right?
yes.
Okay, so we're in agreement that the income approach is the correct approach for valuing the property.
For this hearing, yes. For municipal board, I will reserve, my ability to review the totality argument, but for now, I think of yes.
Okay. And in that order, they had referred to, they didn't call it big box, but supermarkets and.
Generally, yeah.
And convenient, or what do you call the bay department stores, et cetera.
Yeah.
In that particular order, right, as
Yes.
being what was used in order to determine the rent, right?
Yes.
For the whole property.
Right.
Okay, the city is of course aware that there was a second municipal board order that was subsequent to that in 2004, correct?
Yes, unit 90.
Unit 90, yes, so that would be order number A-04179.
I don't have it in the brief, but yes.
Okay, but the city is also aware of that one, in that particular order. The decision was based on automobile deleclership rents, correct? That was
Yes.
the methodology used in that particular
I believe
decision.
so, yes.
Okay,
Am I allowed to follow up with that?
Yeah,
When I looked at those, there was some question on whether those were valid rents or whether they were book rents. Every time I go to track down, they appear to be book rents, so there was a difference in that order, but we're not relying on that order here today.
no, but it is a subsequent municipal board order to the one that you referred to, correct?
There is
It
some
more recent.
Yeah, there is some unevenness
Okay.
in the orders, but just so we're clear to the panel and yourself, there is less than a handful of orders that have been occurred 20+ years ago. And
Correct.
nothing's been back to the municipal board since then to review what was done. That's the specific purpose of the test case that we have.
if I can just interject here, if we're referring to a municipal board order, then in fact, we need to see that entered into evidence.
I don't have that in this brief here. I relied on the Waverly West.
Yeah, but Mr. Smith has brought a different order up, so we don't know what that order says or what the evidence was or anything like that. So if you
Okay,
refer
so-
to a municipal board order, please provide that order.
Okay, so if I may speak to that, Mr. Chair, just so we're clear on the timeliness and proceedings, I guess. So I'm responding to what was presented in the city of Winnipeg's evidence. They provided one order, but not the other. There's really only two. I didn't provide it in my evidence, as we don't feel that either of them are accurate depictions of the proper methodology for valuing these properties. So what I'm pointing out is that the city is only using one rather than both, or presenting one rather than both orders. I do have it here today. I can provide it as rebuttal evidence if you wish. That's up to the panel, of course. But I felt that it was important that it be noted that there is a discrepancy with regard to the municipal board orders and the proper methodology for valuing automobile dealerships based on these two methodologies.
Okay.
All right, so if you wish to see it as rebuttal evidence, I do have it here. I'm not-
It's not up to the board what the parties choose to put in as rebuttal evidence.
Okay. I will submit it as rebuttal evidence then, as it seems to be in question. So if that's a possibility at some point, we will do that. I'll leave that to that period of time, I guess. Let's move forward. I am conscious of our time here, so I'll try and keep this as concise as possible. Again, referring to that municipal board order that you were looking at, and the methodology. So they use essentially big box retail rents. Is the whole building a is the whole building for the type of property we're looking at here, these individual ones at Birchwood Auto Park, are they through and through, is the structure retail, top to bottom, front to back?
The purpose of them being there is to sell. They're good that they're selling is the cars. They're part of that is the service.
Do they sell any goods out of the back?
You can't go by franchise per franchise, so. They service what they sell. That's how a car dealership earns their money. That's how the economic profit happens on this site. They sell, they service, they warranty afterwards,
I'm aware of what they do, what the uses are, obviously. Would you characterize the rear portion of the building as a retail
No,
build out?
a better way to describe it is typically your client, your customers are not going into the back shop areas. They're not going into the service bay areas. I'm not saying a mechanic could pull someone in and say, hey, take a look at this, possibly. I would think that'd be unusual.
Okay, so is the structure use design, is it all homogeneous?
No.
Okay.
Well, typically though, give me something, I'll be here. I'm just going from a broader view. Some of them are pretty bare bones, some of them get more elaborate, depending on which one you're looking at.
Okay. All right, so let's flip forward then if we could. So you're relying essentially on that methodology from the municipal board order that you presented. Big box retail rents rather for the entire property. So let's flip forward to your comparable rents now. I have it beginning on page 3 and carrying forward through page 6. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Okay. And as you said, you've broken them down into different areas of the city. I'll just go through them quickly here. One of them being the Regent and Lagimoje area. That being the first section. Second one being the area immediately around Polo Park. The third one being, this is 27 to 41. This is kind of a well spread out area. In taking in Grant Park Shopping Center and things on Pembina Highway. Skipping forward, we then have numbers 42 to 60, which represent big box stores at the Keniston and McGilvery interchange, that power center node. Then 61 to 72 is the McPhillips and Leela power center node essentially. And then 73 to 80 is essentially the former, and I forgot the new name offhand. I think I have it in my my information, but the former Unicity site that's been redeveloped into a kind of a power center node of its own. As well as a couple of other on Portage Avenue, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at the tenants that we are looking at in these typically. So these are all national tenants, national covenants, correct? So
Yes,
kind of
yes.
AAA tenancies.
Stronger tenants, yes.
Stronger tenancies, okay. And examples of the tenants that are included there. I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list, but bear with me briefly. We're looking at Sobeys Grocery, Save on Foods, Shoppers Drug Mart, Rexall, Best Buy, Leon's, Old Navy, Michaels, Staples, Markswork Warehouse, Bed Bath & Beyond, Marshalls, Cineplex, Indigo, HomeSense, Manitoba Liquor Commission, etc.
Yes.
Those are the type of tenancies included in the list. Okay. All right. And when I look through there, There are no auto dealers that are included in any of those
No.
locations, correct?
No.
And none of these lease comparables are auto related at all, correct?
No, they're not.
Okay. Are there any auto dealerships in those particular centers that you're referring to here?
Yep.
And looking at the. So bear with me. The size, so typically we're looking at 17, 18, 20,000 square feet at the most, correct?
No, if you go through, there's individual ones that are larger, but you're approaching 60,000 square feet, just less of them. The median is for overall, the median is 20,000. The ones on forming the city, it's about 22, a little over 22,000 for the median size. But if you
Okay.
look, there is also 44,000 square foot, 27,000 square foot, 28,000 square foot.
Yeah, so on a one-off basis, there are a couple, is it fair to say, of larger ones, but the bulk of them are considerably smaller and they average out to this 22,000, whatever the figure is for the individual area, correct?
Yes, but you can also look at the raw data for each individual lease as well. So,
Yes, certainly we can, and we will, as we move forward. All right, capitalization rate. I noticed that wasn't really covered in depth.
sorry, maybe I also over that, but no, that'd be on the second and last page of the screen.
Right, so. We have two cap rates here, one for the dealership and one for the restaurant. 5.75% and 5.7%. So those are model driven?
Correct.
And what does the model base that on?
Typically, age built, and there's a number of factors, but location, age, type of structure, size of structure is a big one. If you have a larger structure, there's less competition for it versus if you have a smaller structure, there'd be more players in the market, so to speak, more demand. You typically get a higher selling price, and that's an influence on the capitalization rate.
Okay, maybe I wasn't clear in my question. So these are not based on automobile dealership
No.
transactions and
No.
capitalization rates,
It's-
correct?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware. There are no renting ones, so you're not buying it based on the income that, just so we're clear to the panel. No purchaser of a car dealership is going to buy a car dealership. For what the real estate could generate, they're buying it for what the economic opportunity that it occurs on site to sell and service vehicles generates. That's a difference, that's a valuing real estate with a going concern versus a straight real estate. Purchase, what the real estate itself can generate as far as arm's length rent between, say, me and yourself. I don't get to share your portion of your whatever you're operating under in that building, but that I'm leasing to you. That's a different way of looking at it. So it has nothing to do with sale of a car dealership or the income that would generate.
Okay, so what category is it based on? What asset class?
We're. Again, it's model rate, but we're looking at retail power center, regional, or even if you look at in this case here, you have Thames strip as well. But the range is between 6 and 7, between the 80th percentiles and 20th percentiles. But we have a little bit for the Colliers and also for CBRE. And then Cushman Wakefield's a little higher at 7.5 to 6.5 to 7.5. We have our percentiles between between 5.65 and 7%, 5.85 and 8%, 6.8%, sorry, and 5.6 to 6.75. So we have it there, but given the property, we have a car dealership which would be getting a stronger cap rate, and we have a smaller Tim's, which would obviously be getting a stronger cap rate than typical section.
So for both of those categories, so you've got two there, regional and then power center neighborhood, both of those, the cap rates are under the 20th percentile, correct?
Yeah.
And just so the panel is aware and clear here, so when we're looking at page number 4 there, or I have it as number 4, I guess it is number 4. The retail category of cap rates that the city has, regional, that would refer to regional shopping centers. So we're exclusively looking at essentially 4 shopping centers there, right? Polo Park, St. Paul Center, Garden City and Kildonan Park, correct? So it would be whatever this exceptionally large nationally occupied multi-tenant retail property would trade for to large scale national investors such as teachers' pensions plans, things of that nature, correct?
You're not a small time player if you're looking at those purchases.
Right, so that is taken into account in what we're looking at here, I gather. And to my knowledge, nothing traded in that category in the reference time frame, correct?
I don't work in retail, but I have been investigating sales, but no, there has been one. Or any,
Well, there'd be none in the regional sector, okay.
I'm
So-
going back a number of years with my mind's eyes.
So it was suggested in a prior hearing that regional was what was used as the categorization for capitalization, right? So is that the
That-
dominant one that's been looked at here?
Yeah, that is what obviously the municipal board order kind of guides us to. And I don't disagree with it. I'm looking at it independently from the municipal order. I don't agree with everything I read just because it's 20 years ago. I look at it. What do I think it should be? And I do agree that if you're not going to be looking at what buying the going concern, the franchise itself with the real estate, what that could generate on that consideration, and purchasing the real estate with the business, which is how it would play out in the marketplace. If we can't be looking at it in such a manner, then we should be looking at it how else in economic substitution, which is exactly in line with thinking of this board 20 plus years. So I do agree with it. If I saw something that would be different, I would be adjusting for. I do agree with it. This is the closest, so to speak, apple to orange.
Okay, so just to be clear, then we are comparing these individual standalone automobile dealerships of 20 to call it 40,000 square feet used as auto dealerships to Polo Park, St. Paul, Grant Park, well, not Grant Park, it's not a regional shopping center. Kildonan Place and Garden City, essentially, correct? So we're looking at, and I don't actually handle those, so I'm not sure the amount of square feet there, but are they 1 million square feet or are they 500,000 square feet?
They're very large. They're
Considerably different, correct? Okay. All right. Would you agree that the cap rate is certainly on the aggressive end of retail?
It's on the lower end of the capitalization rate, obviously, but it also reflects 2 tendencies that are very strong. That would be very strong. Your teams are teams.
Yes, this property. You're looking at one property with 2 income streams. Generally, we're looking at one, correct?
Generally, yes. What I'm trying to say is for the retail that RSD, there really isn't a stronger tendency than a Tim's. McDonald's, you get those are your better class that really don't get better than that. So your income's going to be stable for a long time. You don't typically see Tim's holding after 3 years or 5 years not renewing the lease. They're there for typically anchor tenants.
Yeah, so just to go back briefly, you'd referred to valuing the business essentially and whether that should be included or not. So if we were to look at that, which we shouldn't, as for assessment purposes, we're strictly valuing retail or rather real estate value, correct? So if you were to look at that, if you were to look at an office building, should you not then value what a law tenant produces for their business, and perhaps that should be factored into the overall value for an office tower?
Let me be clear, for this hearing, I am not considering that. But I do have to look at the nature of this specific property, how difficult it is to value. And what difficult properties are like this, you do need to think outside the box a little bit. Obviously, the sport has already, other properties the Miss Sports looked at also have. In my mind's eye is, if a property going concern can generate X amount of dollars on site, then what would be in relation to that X amount of dollars? Would they consider an expense for rent acceptable? And you can work your way back to that. I'm not doing that for this appeal. It's not a purpose of this appeal, but there is a way of looking at the going concern, and it's been done a number of times now in this report. So I'll leave that open to how we value it, but that's not specific for this particular property under review here or any of them today. So we're just looking at the one avenue, so to speak, big box stores and what they would rent for, taking that, taking that income back to subject property. Or subject property, so to speak.
Okay. Further question, the rent applied to the vehicle dealership component of the subject property for the current cycle is $13.67, correct?
Yes.
And in prior cycle, it was $15.12 per square foot. So you're essentially seeing the city look at rents having gone down. Is that accurate? Or are we saying that that initial rent was outside the bounds?
I don't base my assessment on what happened last cycle, so to speak. I look at everything.
And Mr. Smith, I will caution that the board doesn't really care what happened last cycle either.
Well, so and I will speak to that as it is important, not particularly with this aspect, but I'm certainly conscious of the board's internal discussion of not looking at comparing one assessment to another, and I certainly grant that, and that is largely with regard to, well, my neighbor's house is valued less than mine. Mine isn't as nice, it should be less, etc. Also on the commercial side, that happens as well. That's what we want to avoid. What I'm presenting here is the history of the property and the assessment details. It's not comparing this assessment to that one. It's comparing how the city's methodology has changed over time.
Well, again, I would say that the possibility is last cycle was wrong as opposed to this cycle. So I don't know what we can take from what they did last cycle.
Okay, thank you. And I certainly understand. For now, those will be all of my questions. I may have follow-up ones in future properties here on the docket today. I do have rebuttal evidence. The one I've submitted already to the board, and then obviously the municipal board order, which rebuts the standalone municipal board order that the city provided.
Okay, well, first of all, we'll deal with questions on your main questions from the panel on the assessor's evidence. So, Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions of the assessor?
I just have one, and it's just maybe that you've dealt with this already. I apologize, but on the restaurant portion, the cap rate is 5.7. Can you speak to your methodology at arriving at that for the restaurant portion?
Yeah, both these are model cap rates. Like, I didn't drive them myself. I don't defend cap rates typically at a board revision as far as direct comparables. We use a chart that we brought in on the second last page. So that is what our department deemed through our mass appraisal model that would fall into. you're looking for a direct capitalization rate for either one, I don't have that here today. We don't typically do that at a board revision level, so.
Thank you very much. And that's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Werhan.
I did have a question, but Ms. Anderson asked it. But just along the line, I'm just trying to put together, your comparables are all, they're not dealerships, they're all just retail. So in as few words as you can explain it to me again, how did you come up with the 1367 a square foot?
Oh, sorry, that is model generated. All the parameters that you see in the income streams are model generated. That's why I touched base on the vacancy and the rent. Typically, I would be looking at around a $17 rent to buy because it's subject property for the car dealership or greater, considering the build up of the greater. But I'd also talk to vacancy as well. If we're going with a straight retail argument, perhaps we should be increasing the vacancy. But you'd also be increasing the vacancy with a retail rent to match. When you do that, it still benefit towards the taxpayer that we wouldn't be doing that. So I don't agree with changing just one isolated value or I should say parameter within the income stream to come up with the value. You should be looking at all and how they relate to each other. But as far as the model, right, that is simply what the model predicted for this subject property, and my review is what is the actual marketplace. If I came up with significantly less rent and it was warranted of a reduction, we'd be most likely applying that. But in this case here, we see that the marketplace is around $18-19 around Union City area, around the end of Portage, it's around 17. So
Okay, then, so for the restaurant portion, with the rent at 2904, that was based on just model driven, not any other,
model driven as well.
and no restaurant comparables then.
Yeah, and the reason why there's no restaurant comparables, we applicant spoke prior to the hearing in Smithville. There was no contention on anything other than the capitalization rate. So we were kind of in agreement on that part. It was just the capitalization rates. That's why maybe they make that clear. Restaurant. Maybe I didn't make that clear. Right.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, did you look at any vehicle service garages in terms of providing rental rates of what the service areas might look like?
No, I didn't agree with that methodology. The primary reason why they were there is to sell. If they weren't there to sell, and there was just service, you'd see a lot more service. But there's always the dealership component. Unless they're selling vehicles, these places wouldn't exist. There's lots of other property. There's lots of other service garages throughout the city that aren't related or run by a car dealership, a full service car dealership, anyways. So in this case here, I still think the most appropriate rent that you should bring in is a retail rent.
Okay, all right. And I'll have some further questions on for you on some of Mr. Points that Mr. Smith will raise. I anticipate will raise in his presentation, especially on the external maintenance costs and that sort of thing on this unit. But I'll let Mr. Smith make his presentation first. So, Mr. Smith, you can begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as point of order, I guess, when would you like to deal with the rebuttal? Does it make most sense now or following my presentation?
Following your presentation, we do your main presentation followed by questions and rebuttal followed by questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so our initial property that we're dealing with here is Unit 10, 3965 Portage Avenue. This is located in the formerly Point West Auto Park. It's now the Birchwood Auto Park. It has been rebranded as Birchwood Auto Park in recent time. This is, as mentioned, the Volvo dealership, and we do have the Tim Hortons on site as well. As Mr. Cole mentioned, we don't have any dispute with regard to the valuation of the Tim Hortons, the restaurant, with the exception of the capitalization rate, which we'll deal with when we get to that. I kind of have some overarching description, commentary in the first place before we get into the report, which I'll run through. And this is to be kept in mind with regard to all of the properties today and the proper, how to properly value them rather. So as first point here, methodology. How should automobile dealerships be properly valued? Well, as the city has presented, there are two aging municipal board decisions that are out there. The city's presented one of them. That was the one that Mr. Cole referred to, order number A-02-223, where it relies on the income approach, which we believe to be the correct one, but thereafter it relies strictly on big box retail, essentially in determining the appropriate rental rate for the entire property. That's the one that the city has referred to. There is the second one, which will be entering into rebuttal, which was subsequent to that in 2004, order number A-04179. This is for unit number 90, 3965 Portage Avenue. So again, in the Point West Auto Park. And in that particular decision, the rental rates were based on automobile dealership rates that were presented by both parties in that particular hearing at that time frame. That was what was relied upon and utilized in that decision. Again, that was in 2004. Now, what this means is that there are essentially two municipal board orders out there, both of them over 20 years old, with diametrically opposed views of what should be used with regard to appropriate methodology in selecting the rental rates. One is using automobile dealership rates, which, as Mr. Cole referred to, there were some real ones at the time, but there are also some book rents, quite obviously, that were included in there. And that was what was relied upon in the 2004 decision. The earlier one, 2002, strictly relied on the big box retail. So when we're looking at proper methodology out there, we don't have a set methodology that is accepted by all parties and moving forward. The city is elected to rely upon the one valuation methodology. I do know that I've been doing this for over 15 years now. In times past, there have been varying methodologies that have been used. As Mr. Cole has moved into place, it has kind of concentrated, as well as others, not just Mr. Cole, concentrated in using big box retail rents. So there's been a variety of methodologies that the city has utilized to select rental rates as well. So essentially, there is no set methodology in that that is accepted by all parties involved. Therefore, and to that point, there are over 200 plus municipal board cases for automobile dealerships that are outstanding, filed by both appellants as well as the city in more recent cycles. There has been no municipal board case that has proceeded to the current point in time. We are now at the point, as Mr. Cole pointed out, that there is going to be a test case in June, which I'm participating in, among others, that will essentially set methodology for valuing this type of property. Now, there may be two other test cases that proceed as well, but this will be the first one. So that is upcoming. So at this point in time, We are not bound to either of these municipal board decisions. There is no set methodology, so it is open to looking at what is the most appropriate way of valuing these. Because the city says we should use this one, that does not mean that we should absolutely use that one. It's one of two, and there's no set methodology. So let's move forward. We are essentially waiting for that test case to occur in order to provide guidance for all of these outstanding cases. So at the Board of Revision level, you are not bound by either of those particular decisions at this point in time. So that is one aspect of the case. Now, as the city had mentioned, they are relying on big box retail rents and power center rents exclusively in setting the retail rents that are applied to automobile dealerships. Now, why should big box retail power center retail rents not be used exclusively in valuing automobile dealerships? Well, there's quite a number of points that need to be taken into account, and this all speaks to the proper methodology for valuing these properties. So first point, where are these power center nodes? Well, as I've already described and the city has presented, they are essentially at the most major intersections in the city for retail. So you're looking at the power center node of Regent and Lagimodiere, where you have extensive big box power center node located on 3 of those corners, anchored by major anchors such as Walmart, Superstore, Home Depot, Rona, etc. You have the Kenaston and McGilvery interchange, again, 4 corners in that case, essentially of power center development and with major anchors and smaller big box tenants. And where are automobile dealerships located? Are they located on those particular corners? No, they're not. They're not front and center. They're not at center ice, essentially. These locations that the city is using are essentially as good as they get. They're center ice. If you locate there amongst this concentrated big box retail, you're in the location that's about as good as it gets, and you're going to pay for that privilege through the rent that you pay. I'll get to that in a moment. How are big box retail power centers developed? Well, they're developed based on having large anchors. So those being your Walmarts, your Home Depots, your Superstores, your Sobeys, your Canadian Tires, retailers of that nature that draw in the large mass of people to do their common shopping. Walmart, obviously, your grocery stores. Canadian Tire sells everything under the sun, Home Depot, etc. We all know what they do. So you base your power center development with your major anchors, which then draw in the smaller big box tenants. So they're not small, but those are the big box tenants that come in to those centers. Why do they locate there? Because they know that they're going to drive more business by being on that site than they will be located in another location, be that further down the road or in another location entirely. The concentration of retail in these power centers is drives more business for all of the tenants on site, and for the developer and owner, it drives a higher rental rate. As a big box tenant, you're willing to pay a significantly greater rent in order to locate on those sites because you will produce more revenue for your business by being there as opposed to other locations. So therefore, you get a better return for your business. If you look at those centers, as I've already described, there are no auto dealerships. There's no auto service in any of those big box power center nodes, essentially. And the locations of where the auto dealerships are, if you look at comparable retail in those particular locations, the rents that they pay in those locations is considerably less than in those big box power center nodes. So that is a significant factor that needs to be taken into account. Another point of why not the big box retail exclusively? Well, structure and use, as I referred to in my questioning with Mr. Poole, they are different animals. Yes, you can say they have a slab on grade, and you know the external structure may be somewhat similar to how a big box is built. That's no different than saying that an industrial building is slab on grade and has the same steel superstructure, etc., with loading at the back, things of that nature. That doesn't mean that those are automobile dealerships. When you look at the structure of a big box store, you are looking at essentially 85 to 90% of the floor being the floor space, at least area being selling floor, with roughly 10 to 15% being warehouse and loading space at the back of the unit. I've been in many of these, as we all have. I was in a Canadian Tire recently, and I visually tested my my statement here, looking at from the edge of the warehousing at the back to the front of the store, and it certainly held true in that instance, and in many other units that I've been in, it has been the same. So you're essentially looking at most of the leasable area being selling floor with a minimum of warehousing and loading at the back. When you look at an auto dealership, that is not the same animal at all. What you're essentially looking at is two components. You have the front of the building, which is your showroom retail type of space with supportive office. Now, you walk into the building, you have the cars on display, you have the financing offices at the back, you have the coffee lounge for the customers to come in, and you may have some additional office on a mezzanine area, things of that nature. But there is a hard line between that display space and selling space at the front of the store and the rear of the structure. Essentially, there's typically a wall, and the rear of the building is your automotive service. So you cross that line, you're very clearly into another section of the building that doesn't remotely look like or resemble or operate as the front of the building does. It's concrete floor that is unfinished. It has drainage grates, all of the various air lines, etc., that are required for servicing. It's automotive service at the rear of the building, and it is far more basic than any retail big box store, and really is not the same as the front. So to say that you should apply big box retail space rents to the entire building is inaccurate, and simply doesn't represent what's on the ground. So again, you're looking at 30 to 40% showroom / office at the front, and 60 to 70% auto repair service at the back. Beyond that, there is essentially no reuse of auto dealerships. They're essentially special use facilities. I'll get to this in my presentation on page 13, but they cannot be readily adapted to other uses. You don't see major national big box retailers or other retailers going into former auto dealerships and operating their business out of there, because A, they don't fit, B, they're in the wrong location, and the structure just doesn't support that particular use. So there is no transition between the two. In the Birchwood Auto Park in particular, which we'll get into in my presentation, there is restriction that they can only be automotive use, so that comes into play as well. And we have no big box tenancies occupying, moving to automobile locations or buildings. And we have no automotive dealerships locating in big box nodes. 2 points there. The owners of property wouldn't want them on site, but more so, the dealerships wouldn't relocate there in any case, because they would be unwilling to pay the rents that are charged in those locations. There's a reason that they're located where they are and not in big box power center nodes. All right, so that's the background with regard to why big box should not exclusively be applied. So what is the proper methodology that should be used? Well, according to appraisal methodology as well as assessment methodology, you need to look at the structure and the use of the structure in determining the proper methodology. So what do we have? I've already described it. We have a building that has essentially 2 components. Number 1, the showroom retail / office area, 30 to 40% of the building roughly. And then we have the second component, which is the automotive service and repair, which is the 60 to 70% of the building at the rear. These are rough numbers. Obviously, it can vary slightly between dealerships, but that is typical of your automotive dealerships in terms of the overall build out. So, principle of substitution, as already referred to by Mr. Poole, in appraisal methodology, there are no first line arm's length automobile dealership rents that are out there right now, so we have no market to directly compare to. So you use the principle substitution to accurately determine what the appropriate rents should be. So for the front of house, yes, we cannot say that big box retail would relocate into these buildings or into these locations. But we do have to use retail rents for that front portion of the building, as it is the closest version essentially to what that front of house is. But you then have the balance of the building, which is automobile service. So in order to accurately reflect what these would rent for on the market, you need to apply retail rents to that front portion and auto service rents to the rear portion of auto service and repair rents to the rear portion of the building. So 2 income streams essentially for the building. Now, I will point out in the addenda at this point, there is ample precedent for there being multiple income streams in an individual building. If you look at my addenda A-3 as an example, and I think hopefully I have it printed out here, but from memory, it is regarding an apartment building located in Osborne Village, 433 River. It has 4 different income streams. The main floor has is all retail. And then you have a parking garage underneath it. You have the majority of the building being multifamily above it, so a 3rd income stream, and then the 4th one, I believe, was one that had a slight tax exemption. So if you look at A-3, it will show you 4 different income streams for that particular property. So there is no need to make a blanket application of one component to a building that should have multiple components to it. There's ample evidence for that from the city's approach in other asset classes. That's only one. I have many others I could have brought in, but I think that covers the point. So that is the proper methodology we believe that should be used in valuing these properties. Second point here, outside of this, and this is specific to the Point West / Birchwood Auto Park development, is non-recoverable infrastructure expense, as you, Mr. Chair, referred to. We have a slightly different situation here than a typical situation in a standard location within the city. If you look at my page 29, this will outline this. I will cover it briefly as we go through it, but the basics are the Birchwood Auto Park was developed under a condominium structure, and it was developed by Birchwood themselves. And at the time of development, there was a development agreement that was put in place between the developer, future owner, and the city. The developer had to put in all of the infrastructure for the entire park, the roadways, the drainage, the servicing, lighting, all of these things had to be put in by the developer. And going forward, the annual maintenance of those components, as well as the ongoing refurbishment and or replacement of those components, is borne by the individual condominium units themselves and the condo organization overall. So if you were to locate in this particular development, you have additional costs for locating here that you wouldn't face in a standard location. So if you're an auto dealer and you locate on Portage Avenue, you don't pay to you do not directly pay to have Portage Avenue scraped, repainted, cleaned. You don't pay to have the sewer redone when it's required. You don't pay to change the lights in the standards along Portage Avenue, et cetera, et cetera. All of these costs are taken into account in the property tax that you pay. So at Point West, you pay that property tax, but you also pay to maintain all of the infrastructure in the park. So it's two components. So that's the background with regard to that. The city included these costs for many cycles, and in recent cycles removed this, disagreeing with that point. Now, what we have here as well is an issue of equity. There are two other developments in the city that are virtually identical to this, where the city has recognized this particular issue and has incorporated those costs into their assessment system in determining the final value. This is for two Terracon owned developments, that being the Terracon Business Park located on Dugald, as well as the Tuxedo Business Park located on Keniston. In both of those instances, those non-recoverable infrastructure expenses are taken into account by the city in the valuation for assessment. There was I believe there was a municipal board order as well that states that they should be taken into account, and they are taken into account. If we look back at Unit 90, I think that is also the case. Now, the city has changed their mind for whatever reason on the Point West Birchwood Auto Park, and we no longer have those included. They should be reinstated because they are additional costs. And we also have the issue of equity between virtually identical properties having different treatment under the same assessment system. So that's the background that I wanted everybody to have. So the methodology should be, as I've outlined it here, which we'll run through. And secondly, the non-recoverable infrastructure component should be included. Now, we are at 2:14, so I will, as I mentioned, be relatively concise as we move through this. I'm not going to dispute anything other than cap rate for the restaurant, so let's delve into this. So page number 3 gives you some background with regard to the subject property. You can see that on my page 3. Zone C3 commercial corridor, built in 2002. And we don't have an overall land plan area ratio determined, as there's no set area that's been broken out for the auto dealership site itself. It is small and it is significantly under the 8:1 land to plan area ratio that is typically desired by automobile dealerships for display of their product, storage of vehicles for service, parking for customers and staff, etc. So it is a very small site for an automobile dealership. If you look at that page as well, you can see the background with regard to the assessment of the subject. 2023 was reduced and has been appealed by both parties to the municipal board. 2020, you see the background there as well as 2018. So you can see the progression in value. Moving forward, our photos begin on page 4. You can see the interior, as well as at the bottom of page 6, the service area at the back of the building. Very clearly different than the front of the building. Description of the components begins on page 7. I'm not going to run through that. It is there for you to refer to if you wish. And we can skip forward to the bottom of my page number 8. As I've already referred to, there was a development agreement put in place with the city of Winnipeg, as well as the developer. And as I've already outlined, both the annual cost of maintaining the infrastructure and the ongoing cost of replacing it is borne by those owners. So picture yourself as any business. You can locate in 2 locations. One is going to cost you more. One is going to cost you less. Other than that, they're apples to apples. Which one are you going to be willing to pay more rent in? Not the one that where you have additional costs. So it does have an impact on what an appropriate rental rate would be for the subject property. Page number 9 covers off zoning and the restriction on use in the property. So it's zone C3 commercial corridor. Additionally, in the condominium declaration for the condo corp, we have restriction to use of all of the properties in the park for strictly automotive sales and repair, as shown in the following excerpt, and then it describes it there. So these units can only be used for automotive use. They can't be used for a typical big box use if they were even interested in that. Site description begins on page 10. You can see the layout there. As Mr. Paul mentioned, you can kind of see the line that breaks the property roughly in half, and you can see the very limited area of the site on the north side of that the dealership is on. So very restricted in terms of site area, which is obviously not optimal for an auto dealership. That is the site itself. Property location comes into play here in particular. We're all aware, I'm sure, of where Birchwood Auto Park is. It is to the west of the Perimeter Highway on the northwest corner of Portage Avenue and the Perimeter Highway, essentially. So it is almost on the almost outside of the city of Winnipeg. There is some area just beyond that, obviously, but it's on the very perimeter of the city, and indeed is beyond that Perimeter Highway. So if you look at that area in terms of comparing it to other areas, and in particular comparing it to where the cities as well as our comparables come from, it's clear that in terms of an ability to drive the same rental rates, this would be limited. I can tell you, both in speaking with Birchwood, the dealers, the owners, as well as myself, the location is not optimal. They purchased there in the first place because it was relatively inexpensive. It was close to their residence, and they had the ability to get a large area of land in order to do the larger development of all of these units that they wanted. That was why it was chosen. It wasn't chosen because it was optimal. But you are looking at a location that is very peripheral. I can tell you that in order to get your car serviced there, you drive out there early in the morning, get a ride back into wherever your business, wherever your work is, and then you get picked up at the end of the day to go out there. It's inconvenient, is how I would put it, and does have an impact on the business that is driven out there. That's not to say that you don't get rides from other locations in the city, but they're not as far out as the Birchwood Auto Park is. You're essentially looking at the Assiniboia Downs racetrack and the MTS Iceplex and the Red River Exhibition Grounds as of the valuation date that we're discussing. So that is the location. Moving forward, automotive industry, I'll cover this relatively quickly. There's some changes in the automotive industry that obviously will have an impact on real estate value going forward, as well as existing as well. We're looking at the rise of online shopping. When you buy a car now, you go online to start with. You look at all of the various options that you have, you determine that one you want, and then you go to that dealership, test drive it, and that's the car you buy typically. You don't hop from dealership to dealership necessarily in order to buy them. So that makes the value of the bricks and mortar far less important. What we're seeing as a result of that is consolidation, where you're getting less, a brand will consolidate their locations within a market. So instead of having 4, they'll have 2 locations, things of that nature. They're essentially becoming more distribution centers rather than typical automobile dealerships. Beyond that, and related to that, and I did read an article on this about 2 weeks ago, Amazon is also entering the market. They're present in Europe, they're also present in North America, and they are expanding. What does Amazon do? Well, they drive down the margins in any market that they enter, be that books or automobiles, etc. So that puts a crimp on the business model, puts a crimp on profitability, and obviously drives less of a need for auto dealerships themselves. So again, you have that consolidation. COVID-19, we've probably discussed it endlessly in this cycle. It had an impact on automobile sales as well. Also on the supply of the actual product that they're transacting. So there were significant disruptions in manufacturing of components, in shipping of those components. So there was a dramatic reduction in the number of available vehicles available as of the valuation date. So COVID started in 2020, but the effect of that was considerably ongoing. There were significant layoffs in the industry in the local area. So we'll skip forward again into my page number 14. I've already referred to this briefly in my initial presentation. So automobile dealerships are special use facilities, i.e. they're not readily adaptable to other uses. Other types of tenants don't use them. In the article mentioned there in the appraisal journal,
if I can interrupt here, Mr. Smith, we're kind of running long on this one. Can we kind of move it along a bit?
Absolutely, and I am conscious of that, and I won't refer to any of this material again. I'm simply covering it once. So what you're looking at, if you want to read that particular section, is the automobile dealerships are special purpose properties. They cannot typically be used for other uses. I'm not saying this myself. This is standard thinking in the appraisal and assessment world. It's there for you to see. Feel free to read it if you want. The additional component that I'm going to bring up there that speaks to this and also speaks to vacancy in the valuation, there's a reason I'm discussing all of these aspects, is you're essentially looking at a 3-stage life cycle for an auto dealership. So given that they don't lend themselves to other uses, you have your first run dealership, that being your major brand, be it Ford, Mazda, Chev, whatever the branding is. That's your first run dealership. Once they become obsolete for that particular purpose, be it the location, the size, the build out, the layout, whatever it is, they typically descend to either being used as a used auto dealership, which is a lesser value, obviously. And once they are essentially obsolete for that purpose, they typically become vacant and become a development site. So what you'll see in the marketplace is this descent of these dealerships over time as the market changes for this particular asset class. So you'll see I've outlined 6 different ones here. In order to save us time, I'm not going to run through them, but what you'll see is instances of a first run auto dealership then becoming vacant and being vacant for a very extended period of time, where it's not in use for anything and is ultimately redeveloped based on its use as for another purpose. So we're talking not months here, but multiple years in most cases. In one, we have over a decade. So in looking at the issue of vacancy, it's not that auto dealerships, when they're auto dealerships, have vacancy. It's that they will have vacancy, and that needs to be taken into account. And that vacancy isn't minimal, it's ongoing. It's a very extended period of time for that property. So that's all laid out on pages 14 and 15. If we look quickly at page 15, what I've shown you here is essentially meant to show you the difference between a big box store and an automotive dealership. So this is one of the city's examples, 840 St. James Street. It's a Michael's location. If you look at the bottom of the page, there's an aerial of the property. You can see the cross street kind of in the middle there, and the Michael's is to the north of that. So looking at that, you can tell that you're looking at roughly 90% of the unit being selling floor, and then you have 10% warehousing and receiving at the back of the site. That's a visual representation of what I was showing you. All right, covered all the background. We won't do that again, but that is the basis for how they should be valued and the specifics of the Point West Birchwood Auto Park. So let's move forward. We have 2 components in valuing the property: the retail showroom and then automotive service and repair. So let's begin with the automotive service and repair section. So we're essentially, again, looking at, call it 60 to 70% on average of the square footage, leasable square footage of the building. So on page number 18, I have given you examples of automotive repair and service locations throughout the city. Obviously, they're not all going to be ideal comps, and that they won't be all at the valuation date, same size, same location, etc. What we've given you here is a perspective on the market. Some of them are better than others, and we'll point that out. So beginning with number 1, we have a Boyd Auto location. Obviously, we know what Boyd does, 15,000 square feet, 2018 lease for a net rental rate of $8.50 a square foot. This is on Route 90. $8.50 per square foot. That's one of our bigger comps here, obviously, in terms of size, more comparable to the majority of these here today. Number 2, 1870 King Edward, also Route 90, just under 18,000 square feet, 2019 lease at $10.15 a square foot. Both of those on 5-year terms. Moving forward, you can see, obviously, there's some smaller ones that we've included that are relatively recent in time as well. These are repair shops, lubrication shops, which obviously happens at these dealerships as well. Transmission and general repair shops as well. I'll point you to number 7. 5,600 square feet. This is located essentially at the corner of Bison Drive and Pembina, very good location, 5,600 square feet, 2017 lease for a 6-year term, $10.71 a square foot. Moving forward, number 11, 231 Oak Point Highway. This is a former Harley Davidson dealership, so former dealership, bit different, obviously, in that they sell motorcycles rather than cars, but very similar other than that. Built in 1990, almost 15,000 square feet, 2017 lease at $7 per square foot for 5 years. Jumping down the page, number 16. This is located on the corner of Ness and Portage Avenue. On the southeast corner, it was formerly a Mercedes dealership in this time frame. Then it became a Birchwood credit location, true arm's length lease, as I know the participants, and they were not the owner of the property. It was leased at $7.50 a square foot for nearly 23,000 square feet in 2015. And finally, number 17, 1322 Waverly. This is the Not Auto location, premium used cars, located on the southeast corner of Waverly and McGilvery. Excellent location in southwest Winnipeg, prime area, for their particular purchasers or clientele rather. Just over, well, 27,603 square feet, 2018 lease for $6.85 a square foot. Now, that is on the low side. One of the reasons for that is that the tenant was required to do all of the build out of the building themselves. It was a former industrial building, and they had to do the build out for the front and division into the back, into the service area, etc. So obviously they bore those costs. So that $685 is on the low side, and it would be higher than that in a normal situation, but it does give you a good metric to review as well. So overall, you know, we're looking at the larger ones being in that $8.50, $10 per square foot range in most recent time. And the smaller ones, obviously, some of them having higher rental values, but on looking at economies of scale, obviously, if you have a significantly larger repair place, it is going to lease for less, as you're going to pay less for the greater amount of space, all other things being equal. So that is the automotive repair side. Now, critical to the valuation again is showroom retail. So we've given you 24 comps shown on page number 20. And what I will point out here is that there will be a couple of instances where we have the same comps as the city. Very few of them, though. Typically, what we are looking for is locations that are in as close proximity to where auto dealerships are located as possible, similar size, and similar utility as a big box can be. So most of our comps, well, essentially none of them will be on big box sites, as we don't agree with that being appropriate rental rate for the entire buildings that we're looking at. We want comparable locations, and that's what we're giving you here. So what I've given you is photos and a location map for many of these, and we'll skip through this quickly, but cover the basics for you. So number 1, 1520 Regent Avenue West, 26,000 square feet. This is a Leon's Furniture location, 2021 lease for $14 per square foot. Now, if you look at page 21, you can see where that is located. Now, the big box retail node is centered on Flash Moje and Regent to the west, where the Walmarts and that is. This is not there. It's on the very periphery of that. They are paying $14 in that location for 26,000 square feet as of 2021. Then we have a Giant Tiger on Pembina, $9.80 a square foot, similar size, good location in Southwest. I'm not going to run through all of these. I'm just going to again touch the highlights. 1540 Regent. The reason I'm focusing on some regions is that obviously we have extensive auto development there. 1540 Regent, number 3, 23,000+ square feet, a Staples location, 2020. $10.25 per square foot on a long-term lease. So relatively recent, virtually the same exact location as number 1 on the very periphery of that development and really not attached to it. Beyond that, number 4, 1487 Brick. This is an excellent comp in that it is located beyond the train tracks on Regent, on the north side of Regent, and in very close proximity to the auto dealerships there. So you have nearly 40,000 square feet, built in 2005. We have lease beginning in 1998, but with steps all the way along, and as of the valuation date, they're paying $13.55 per square foot in that location. That is an absolutely excellent comp. It is shown to you on page 23, and it is about as good as they get. Number 5, 3292 Portage, 28,000 square feet, Princess Auto location, 2017 lease at $13.50 a square foot. Now, the city has quite a number of comps in the former Unicity development. This is not there, where you have Walmart and other big boxes. It's in a smaller shopping center on the south side and a little bit down. So again, adjacent, but not in the big box center. They are paying $13.50 per square foot as of 2017 on a 5-year lease. Major redevelopment happening there. Same location, Giant Tiger, number 6. 2019 lease at $11 a square foot with some steps going forward. So that is quite a number of the important ones. I will also point you to the other highlighted ones here, 10 through 12, 2860 Pembina Highway, similar location to the subject in that you're almost at the end of the developed section of the city, just inside of the perimeter. And we have redevelopment of the Fort Richmond Mall there. 2018 lease for PV Mart at $10.50 a square foot for 33,000 square feet, Dollarama. Smaller at 15,000 square feet, 2020 lease at $15.54. Very similar in terms of location. And again, you're not sitting on a Walmart site that is going to drive exceptional business. Additionally, you have Shapes there on McPhillips, $11.50 per square foot, very similar location. That is on the north side, rather on the east side of McGilvery, north of Leela, immediately adjacent to where all of those dealerships are on North McPhillips there beyond the hospital. $11.50 per square foot for that location. And finally, jumping down, 1290 Keniston, numbers 22 and 23. We have a redevelopment of a former industrial building there into a retail location. This is located immediately beside 2 newly built Birchwood auto dealerships to the north of it, and the Mercedes dealership to the south of it. So it borders these properties. In 2016, the leases for the 2 there were $12 and $12.50 a square foot. Those have since been renewed and have increased. I don't have access to the information, but it was reported that they were between $14 and $15 a square foot. So I acknowledge that that is from that time frame, and they would be somewhat higher now in that 14 to 15 range. So what we've given you here is, yes, retail comps for that front in locations that are more comparable and more similar to where the automobile dealerships are located, and therefore what a real retail rent for those locations would be. So they range as you can see, from kind of that slightly under $10 a square foot up to the $15 a square foot at the outside, kind of the top end. Again, you've got these photos and maps for those running through page number 26 if you wish to see them. So let's move forward. Page 27 for valuation. I give you the ranges for both auto repair as well as the retail. And in order to determine the overall rent, what I've given you is an example. Now, this is not exactly what I did, but it gives you a means of how to best determine a rate for these things. So you look at essentially a blend of the two. So my example is a 100 square foot building. You use my breakup of the building, 60%. Automotive repair, 40% showroom, using a $10 rate for the automotive and 15 for the showroom. The upper end of what our comps are showing, you end up with a $12 per square foot rent. Now, should the automotive repair portion be somewhat lower than that? Certainly, perhaps it could be, given the scale of it for the properties that we're talking about. Is $15 the right number for showroom retail? Obviously, I leave that up to you, but we've gone to the upper end of the range of what we feel is appropriate. We're not saying there's no value to these properties, and we're valuing them at the upper end of the range, not comparing them to small little repair shops, etc. So if you look at that example, it comes to $12 a square foot. Looking at the subject property, we do believe $12 a square foot is an appropriate rental rate on an overall basis. So we've assigned $12. Skipping forward, vacancy and collection. We give you the stats for various things here. Obviously, a retail vacancy is shown underneath the chart. Johnson report is reporting strip center vacancy 3.8%, 5-year average of 3.8%, overall retail vacancy 3.3%, 5-year average of 4.8%. Now that is specific to retail. I've given you industrial above this, not that it's industrial, just gives you another metric to look at. I've already described the life cycle of these things and the fact that they lay vacant for a significant period of time once they go out of service, essentially, once they're obsolete. So we have assigned a vacancy rate of 4% as being more appropriate to a property of this type, because you need to look at the longer time horizon of it. 2% vacancy that the city's used essentially amounts to a single month vacancy over a 5-year period, which we don't believe to be appropriate. Moving forward, expense allowance. I've covered this endlessly. I don't want to cover it again. The information is there for you to see. We have a dispute, obviously, with the city to the total amount. There was a municipal board hearing on a different asset class that essentially determined a level slightly under 5% for the building mentioned at the bottom of my page 29, that being 444 St. Mary. Mr. Poole, I think, was involved in that. And on an overall basis, I think it's a good indicator in terms of a medium between where the city is projecting, which is 2 to 3%, which doesn't take into account a lot of expenses, and the 7% that was formerly used by the city. So we are using 5% in our analysis. Again, information is there for you to see. Let's skip forward. Shortfall we agree with. And we come to the non-recoverable infrastructure expense. So I've described this extensively, not going to go through it again. It is costly to do a study on what these actual amounts are. There was a study done back in time, as shown on page 30, in order to determine the annual costing and the overall replacement costing. Obviously, you're not going to do that on an annual basis if it costs a significant amount of money to have an engineering firm do a report for you. So we're relying somewhat on older information here. Obviously, costs have gone up. we haven't changed the costs. We assign the pro rata amount for both the annual maintenance and the ongoing replacement rehabilitation of those components. So individual condo here is 10.149%. We assign that portion of the annual costs as well as the ongoing replacement costs. The detail is there for you. It is also included in the decision on Unit 90, 3965 Portage Avenue, which I have outlined towards the bottom of page 30, where they ruled in favor of accepting these additional infrastructure costs. That is the background on those costs. So in our valuation, we include those as obviously it does have an impact on what you would pay to rent that property, as well as what those costs are. So we include that in our model, and we can skip forward to capitalization rate. Obviously, there's no true cap rates for auto dealerships, as they are not leased on an arm's length basis. We're in agreement with that nearly exclusively. So what we have provided is an overview of actual transactions in the retail asset class in the city of Winnipeg in the relevant time frame and leading up to it. So if you look at our chart on page 32, none of these are going to be perfect because they're not auto dealerships, but what this gives you an indication of is the return expectations, what a standard retail investor would be willing to utilize as a capitalization rate in acquiring retail properties in the city. So most of these are strip malls. There's one regional shopping center reported. And we can look at some quick details here. First one, McPhillips Street, regional shopping center, 2023 trade, reported by the purchaser at a 9.13% capitalization rate. So that would be a regional shopping mall and is well above obviously the range that the city is projecting for those type of assets. We're not saying that that's exactly what should be used for this property, or that regional shopping centers are indeed the closest to them. I think they're outsized in terms of what auto dealerships are, but it does give you an indicator. The rest of our comps there are well located strip malls on major thoroughfares with good demand in the marketplace, ranging between 1.5 and 5 million, essentially, transacting between 2018 and 2021. I think I've given you photos of each of them as well, so you can see the type of asset we're looking at. So relatively recent transactions, most of them 2021 onwards. And our capitalization rates based on the in-place income and expense are in that 7.1, 8.9, 6.3, 6.5, 7+% range. So all kind of in that, call it 7 to 8% overall as kind of the outliers. There's a couple of outliers beyond that, but that's typically what you're seeing. So photos are there for you to see on the following pages, and we can move forward. The commercial brokerages operating in our market also have some stats. These have been spoken about extensively as well, so I won't give you a lot of background on those. Cushman is indicating cap rates of 6.5 to 7.5% for non-anchored retail strip malls. Colliers having a range of 6.5 to 7.5% for what they term investment grade retail assets. Additionally, and this is important, should be taken into account, Bank of Canada interest rates jumped 4% over a 1-year period from the spring of 2022 to the valuation date, April 1, 2023, from 0.5 to 4.75%. historic rise essentially in interest rates. What does this cause? It causes lending rates from mortgage brokers, mortgage providers to go up. And as mortgage rates go up, obviously your return goes down on an asset, so you're willing to pay less for it. And the capitalization rate for that asset would increase. That's how the market works. Now, there's not a lot of transactions in that time frame, as what it essentially did was freeze the marketplace. Nobody was trading or purchasing during that particular time frame that we refer to. But as of the valuation date, it would cost you significantly more to buy an asset and your return would decrease. So taking all of this into account, special use nature of the auto dealerships, not going to be used by any other retail tenancy, the location of them, generally peripheral, and the investment potential of the properties, we've assigned a cap rate of 7.5% as appropriate. In 2023, Board of Revision used an 8% cap rate on all of these Point West auto dealerships decisions. That's included in the addenda. And 7.5% for newly built dealerships on that Kenaston frontage there, 180 and 200 Louse. So bottom of the page, you have our final valuation. So hopefully I know this has gone on quite long. We won't cover it again, but each of these components is important and we've gone into each of them in detail here. So we're not looking for the lowest possible value. We're looking for the appropriate value. You can see how the rental rate was determined, why the vacancy rate should be more appropriately slightly higher, why the expense allowance is 5%, the inclusion of the infrastructure costs, because it costs you more to locate there, and it needs to be equitable with the same type of property in the marketplace, 7.5 cap rates. This produces our final value for the auto dealership of $2,284,000. So just to detail the infrastructure costs, the annual maintenance cost comes off before to determine the NOI. And then the future infrastructure costs comes off the capitalized value before you come to your final market value. That's the proper methodology. So $2,284,000 for the auto dealership. Moving on to the restaurant, in no world are cap rates under 6% for retail properties, whether they're standalone Tim Hortons or not, doesn't happen. We don't see it in the marketplace. You look at the chart from the city, the brokers are in agreement with that. I've applied a low cap rate of 6.5% to that income stream to give a $923,000 value. So you combine the two, and we get total market value of $3,207,000 as shown on page 38 and summarized thereafter. The addenda materials include the income and expense for the subject property. As mentioned, my page A-3 is simply showing that the city does value individual structures with multiple income streams in the fashion that I'm describing. In other situations, we've given you decisions from this cycle on other auto dealerships, as well as the assessment cycle before, and then description with regard to articles and the future of auto dealerships and the impact of COVID in the time frame that we're discussing. And that, I think, covers it. I apologize for the length of time, but as mentioned, we won't do that twice.
Okay, yes, we're really going to have to move along here. But first of all, let's take a break until 3 o'clock before we get into questions. I'm sure we've gone almost 2 hours now. Okay, questions, Mr. Pohl.
Okay, I will try and be concise. I will touch on a few questions. I realize there's municipal or cascades that will resolve a lot of this coming up. So part of this will be just with that my mindset, but I will ask the pertinent questions I feel this here today. I just want to turn to page 9, be brief. This clause 2.32 is out of the condominium agreement that was in place,
That's correct.
and it's not in the brief.
No, the excerpt is
Okay.
the important
So this
part.
agreement was between all owners of the condominium, all 9 properties.
It's the
10 properties,
condominium,
including the service garage.
correct, the condominium corporation itself and the city.
So, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, at that time, there was a number of ownerships, primarily Chipman Group. Current owner owned majority of them, one other tenant. In recent years, I don't know if there was other
There was
tenants.
other tenants, there was one other owner and one other partial owner going back in time, yes.
Okay, so. I'm assuming that the restrictive covenant as far as change of use. Was between those parties.
The condominium, well, let's read it here, page number 9, it's not something I've looked at recently, so let's read the detail. Condominium declaration for the condo corp as registered on title restricts use of the properties to automotive sales and repair, as shown in the following excerpt. So that would apply to it doesn't matter whether it's a single ownership or not, any of the owners.
Everyone, exactly. And my point was, this whole condominium development was developed for manufacturers pushing this development. These kind of things started in California, and manufacturers noticed that they sold more cars. So there was a push to redevelop. It's not isolated to the city of Winnipeg. There's a number of them throughout North America.
No, I'm not saying it's isolated to that.
So the whole emphasis here is to move into this condominium, develop it for the purpose of selling sales on a greater volume that would be standard.
At the time, it was, yes. And if you look at the modern day, that is different.
So, without looking at the condominium agreement in full, I would have to assume that the condominium agreement would be to ensure that one property owner didn't decide to make a retail environment, meaning they're selling jeans, t-shirts, whatever, versus other ones who are trying to have.
That is the point.
So the city wouldn't have had a restrictive covenant on that element. It would be between the ownership.
With regard to the condominium declaration and corporation itself, yes, there is a restriction
So,
on title as well. I'm sorry, perhaps we didn't include everything we should have here.
so my question to you would be, now that there is one common ownership throughout the entire park, this condominium agreement could be amended, dissolved, changed at will.
It could always be amended, changed it, well, if you had all of the parties or the correct percentage to agree to it. No,
But-
it's not going to happen.
But now
It
there's
hasn't
one
happened.
party, one ownership, the entire.
Why would they do it now if they didn't?
I'm
do it
just saying
now?
it's dependent on one party, so there is no,
That doesn't change things.
so. My next question would be. This was rebranded once that ownership group purchased the remaining property and rebranded from. Rebranded to Birchwood Auto Park, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And formerly it was Point West Auto Mall.
That was the original name, yes.
So when we're looking at rents and comparables from other retail nodes, power centers nearby, you're saying it creates a greater impact that you would want to be in those places because you would sell more based on the box anchor tenants, so to speak, relationship. Why would that not be exactly what we see on the site of the park? It was developed for such.
Yeah, no, and I take your point, and I don't want to go on at length here, but it is different. So when you're talking about a big box retail development power center node, you're looking at the entire marketplace and common purchases that people make. So you have your anchor tenants, your Walmarts, et cetera, of the world that drive that development. All of the national branded big box tenants want to locate there, as everybody's got to go there on a frequent basis and shop for all of their needs. It drives significantly greater business for those big box tenancies. In this case, what you have is an auto mall that was developed back in 99 through 2002 roughly. Each of these units is on too small of a site. Essentially, the development of auto dealers these days is different in terms of the size of structures that are built, the layout of them, the need for storage, etc. So yes, does an auto park is the intent of an auto park to drive more business? Yes, that's the intent of the auto park. But, and I'm speaking from having directly had this conversation with the main owners of Birchwood, it is not how it works in reality with the Birchwood Auto Park. They don't do more business in the Birchwood Auto Park than they do in their region locations for the same brand, etc. It's not how it works.
I can't speak to the going concern and their generation of economic profit, but I can speak to that there are 10 properties on the totality of, one of them's not here today, obviously, with the collision center, but there are 10 properties in the auto park, auto mall, whatever you want to call it, that have approximately 250,000 square feet.
I haven't added them up, but I will take your word for it.
So-
But you've heard me discuss the business there, and from the horse's mouth, they do not do more business. In fact, they do less business at Point West than they do in some of their other locations.
So that in totality of size would be smaller than any Walmart, would be smaller than any Canadian Tire,
Yes,
any national.
250,000. Well, no, that would be bigger than a Walmart or.
That'd be bigger than anything. So my point is they're creating a destination for buyers to go to,
Oh, yes, yes.
similar to a mall, which is exactly.
No, not similar to a wall, and we've spoken about the differences. I can go on more if you want.
Oh, I think we'll stop there for the disagreement that we have. We have one position back there, so.
Yeah.
Moving on. I'll just touch base on the infrastructure. We have differences now currently. I believe it was 2016, we stopped doing that, adding infrastructure costs. Your position is to follow Unit 90 order. Our position is to reevaluate, and what we see here as far as the rents that are in place that are lower than log wise anyways, that they should be for the marketplace. And that discrepancy between the rents play out that we should double dip basically. So that's our position. It's different from yours. I just want to highlight that to the panel. Would you see that as being correct?
No,
No, not the removal of, we all know that, we don't know that. But that is our argument between the two positions.
I know that you have obviously a different position on it, and we do not see it as being double dipping in any sense. It's an issue of equity, and each component is impacted by that.
And I just wanted to touch on the uses, and I've investigated the marketplace obviously as well. You're indicating that your life cycle of your full service dealership to used car dealership to lesser than, and there's no use for it. I generally agree with it.
It's a
But-
general statement.
But there are instances where, and I'll use this as an example, a newer dealership, that retail can go into these locations. A good example of that is on Beach in 1066 there, and you had the former Hyundai dealership, build a new dealership just off to the Elijah Modi.
Is this
maybe
not
100 away.
post-reference material?
No, it's not this reference, Fat Boys Automotive or Fat Boys Auto Parts moved into the former dealership and basically occupied it as such. So there is a minor use, but there is still a use.
So you have an automotive use moving into an automotive property. Yes, I could see some use in that regard. That would be the closest that you would see in the marketplace, certainly. If I'm not mistaken, I think that property was on the market for a very extended period of time before that transacted as well.
Next question would be, you're basically taking, just highlighting again, maybe not quite all big boxes that we're using, but a few, and taking that to the showroom area, sales area, and then using it as a hybrid to create a secondary vehicle service rate based on the marketplace that you see. So you have two differentials, right?
We have two components, yes, two uses.
Are any of these subject properties, in order to have that, you would have to have two separate leases? Are any of these properties under appeal here today multi-tenanted properties? Are there two separate CRUs that are fully demisable and leasable?
Are the different tenancies? No, quite clearly there's not, because they're all owner occupied, so they're not different. I mean, there may, and internally, do they have a different operating company for the repair? I couldn't speak to that.
What I'm saying
I don't
is,
think so.
Could two,
Could they be demised? Yes, theoretically, they could be demised in that fashion.
theoretically, any building could, but realistically, you'd have two separate CRUs, two separate leases, two separate uses of the site. You
But
could,
there are separate uses of the site.
no, what I'm saying is about two arm's length tenancies, meaning you'd be a tenant in the back with no frontage up front. You're not having a minus go in the back and or another type of tenancy of such.
Wow.
And not be able to have any frontage, not be able to have any utility for someone to see from the front of the property.
Well, so 2 points, there'd be signage and it would be easily demisable, that being the second point. Third point is there's any number of retail locations where there's lesser exposure to the frontage anyway. And as you say, you're going to, as you call it, a destination, so you know they're there.
All right, generally speaking, would you agree in the marketplace for car dealerships, subject properties included, smaller is not as desirable from manufacturer standpoint? That's why there's additions being made to these properties here. That's why there's new dealerships being built at a greater scale. Would you agree that the manufacturers are demanding that bigger, newer, more is primarily what you see when car dealerships are being built or being added onto?
I would say to an extent that is true. It's not overall true. Certainly brands have different needs, and you'll see different structures going up. You'll see failed auto brands having other auto brands go into that same structure, so still first run, but going into those units, say on Waverly. So sorry, I'm losing your question here.
Generally car dealerships that are being built now are bigger, newer, more size.
Depending on the brand, but yes, and that spoke to my point of consolidation, et cetera. So when we look at the auto park, they're generally smaller.
So what I'm saying is your avenue where you brought in Amazon and the car buying changing and there was going to be less volume. There is no less volume of sales. From what I can see is there is increase in dealership size, there's increase, and obviously with size comes greater economic profit, economic opportunity on that site. Would that not go against what you're indicating as far as the marketplace somehow contracting?
Well, no, neither of us have stats presented today with regard to the volume of sales in the marketplace. I don't have that. You don't have that. Neither of us can truly speak to that at this point. What you're seeing is contraction in the number of dealerships out there for a brand is what you're seeing in the market. So some of the smaller ones do go by the wayside, and when we look at Point West, many of them are on the smaller side as we move forward.
Well, when you add up the totality that you see within the market.
But we're not adding up the totality.
No,
It's
we're
not
looking at-
250,000.
No, we're looking at it individually.
20 and
And that's
25.
And that's my next question that we need to do here. There is a condominium agreement and it was in place when there were several property owners or several properties with not uniform ownership. If the current ownership group chose to, could they not dissolve the condominium agreement and simply make it one roll number? Could that not be sold as an investment?
Well, it'd be up to the city as to whether they wish to do that, and that would be. I can't imagine the complexities of changing the legal structure of your land ownership and amalgamating it, and you'd have something like 13 structures on an overall site that has a roadway, and no, I don't see that.
So like, and that's my next leading to my next point, you're basically creating a mall.
No. Sorry, go ahead.
But that's essentially what a mall is, whether it be St. Vital, Old Park, KP. It's essentially the same thing.
No, it's not.
And that leads back to the infrastructure question where the city doesn't subsidize or create an expense for that, where property owners have to cover that or as far as their totality of the property. Whereas here, that order, the municipal board for Unit 90 did give that.
So let me speak to that directly, because this is a critical point. So you have St. Tel Mall or Pole Park Mall, whatever it is. Do they have parking lots and circulation lanes? Absolutely, they do. Do they pay for the Portage Avenue or the St. Mary's Road or St. James Street? No, they do not. And that is the situation here, where you're going off-site to a roadway that they are exclusively responsible for. So
Yeah, but that
they pay the
roadway,
tax
if you look
and
at
they
it,
pay for the infrastructure. And it's exactly the same as the Terracon situations that have been ruled, as well as the.
I can't speak to that. That's getting in comparison of assessments. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just
Not,
looking
not
at,
comparison of assessments, that is apples to apples.
I'm simply looking at, if we're looking at a mall, you have like you said, circulation lanes, you can drive around any mall basically. And they property owners have to cover the infrastructure, maintaining and putting that in. Would that not be any different here?
It is different.
And that's where disagreements that we have on that is. So
Yeah,
without-
we're highlighting a disagreement here, but we're kind of going over the point again. Can you move
Okay.
on?
That is my last question. Thank you.
Okay, Trace, Miss Anderson, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions at this time. Thank you, sir.
Miss Werhun?
None, thank you.
Okay, I just want to go over, number one, your expense allowance, 5%. That's based on a very specific decision on a very specific property, is it not?
So, no, and let me find the page for that, what I. As.
And I have read that decision from cover to cover.
I'm sure you have. So no, what I have done here is, obviously, there's been this dispute for a number of cycles. The city dropped this expense allowance from 7% to 2%. Now it's back up to 3%. And the dispute over the amount is based on what is included in it, and the city excludes things that shouldn't be excluded. We include them. And this is the only decision that has been taken at the municipal board, granted on another asset class that Mr. Bull was involved in. And I'm not saying that this is universally correct. What I'm saying is that it is in between what the city has said and what it formerly was that is being allowed, essentially. When we went through the exercise of determining this, and because it takes so much time and has been covered so many times, I don't include the whole thing now. But when we went through the exercise of looking at what this should be, it was actually higher than 7%. We're compromising significantly at 5%, and we
Well,
provide that decision as additional backup. So it's not.
according to your
exclusively on-
page 29, you're still including leasing commission, improvements, and tenant inducements, which the municipal board very emphatically said shouldn't be included.
Well, true enough, that is, this is what the appraisal methodology refers to as what should be included. So if you want to take one or two of those out, it doesn't reduce the argument entirely to being the city 100% correct. So as I said, we're at a compromise situation at 5%.
Okay, now getting on to the common costs. There are a number of apartment complexes that I've heard hearings on where there are multiple buildings with large common parking lots, etc. Do not those kind of complexes also incur maintenance costs on the parking lot and snow clearing and Yeah, snow clearing is deducted, but not long-term maintenance costs.
Well, so, so the fundamental difference here is that the infrastructure that we're referring to is not simply a parking lot. That a mall or a apartment building would have its access, its drainage, its water supply, its lighting, it's everything. It's all of the infrastructure, sewage, etc., that you would have in a normal location that these owners are responsible for. So locate on Portage, you're paying your tax, you don't pay for any of that directly. In Birchwood Auto Park, you pay your tax and you pay to maintain all that infrastructure as well as replace it on an ongoing basis. And you cannot get into Birchwood Auto Park without using the roadway that they supply themselves. It's a means of offloading cost from the city when developments like this happen. That's how it was done with Terracon. That's how it was done with Birchwood.
Okay, now I'll turn to Mr. Poole then. I'm familiar with the Tarragon properties, having heard appealed on them in past cycles. Are they still deducting the common costs from the assessments on those properties?
I can't comment on that. It's one of
I
the,
can't.
I'll take Trevor at his word. I don't work in industrial, part of the municipal board that I'll be getting to be part of, Soling. I'll only be doing it basically. I'll be looking at that, which Trevor's claiming, but like I can't do that for the specific.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
That's part of a broader scope than I can do for this hearing. But
so Mr. Smith, your evidence then is that it is still being deducted for those properties?
absolutely. So I'm under oath here, which I take very, obviously that's critical. I believe in that to no end. I've had discussions with the Terracon themselves. I've looked at the appeal documents, etc. Yes, it's still included by the city in the
Okay.
valuation model.
And Mr. Poole, once again, to be clear, what is your argument on not including these costs?
well, I feel that the lower rent that we have put on it is so far below market where it should be around $17, $18 this specific instance that it's already been accounted for. If you put that into it, that increases your obviously your PGI. If you were going to be putting that back in, then you would have to make the adjustment on the top end. The other part of that is if you're going to be putting in what you're seeking is a 5% non-recoverable expense allowance, and you're seeking 5% still, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it. You're double dipping again. So I would need to review this in full, and that's part of a test case which has been delayed a number of times now. That hopefully will resolve this issue in June.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions. Now, Mr. Smith, you said you had a rebuttal. It's been submitted, has it?
Yes, I believe there's two rebuttals. One was simply submission of that board order from 2004 regarding an auto dealership, unit 903965. I don't intend to speak to it. It's there for information as you required it. So that is the one rebuttal. And then my original rebuttal evidence should be in your file there too, if you've got that.
Yep.
Okay, so if you want to open that up, this again speaks to the city's comparables and the appropriateness of them with regard to determining market rent for these assets here today. So I'll proceed through this quite quickly. What I've done essentially is visually summarize the material that the city presented as far as lease comparables. So they have them broken out into areas. I've done the same. And you can see the tenant as well as the location of what that tenant is and make your comparisons in regard to what an appropriate rent should be at the subject property. So begin on my page number 1 there. This is the Regent Lajimoje Power Center node. At that node, you have the Crossroads Station Shopping Center. You have Kildonan Crossing Shopping Center, and you have the Kildonan Place Shopping Center, obviously on the north side there. So what I've done is lay out who those tenants are and what they're located within. The numbers show you exactly where they are. So you look at those, number 1 through 13, we're looking at the bulk of them being in that Crossroads Station Shopping Center. So you're looking at Mark's Work Warehouse, Best Buy, Ashley, Sport Check, Michael's, Petland. And we're onto the site of the regional shopping center, Kildonan Place Shopping Center, Save On Foods, Cineplex, Shoppers Drug Mart, who has a very high rental rate. I think Good Life Fitness is off to the west there. In any case, the bulk of them are in Power Center node or the regional shopping center. Obviously, you're going to pay more as a tenant to locate in these locations than you would where auto dealerships are. Where are the auto dealerships? This one is critical. So if you look at the aerial there and you move along Regent Avenue, you go across the tracks and you go down the way, that's where the auto dealerships are. They are not in these sites. They don't benefit from Walmart drawing customers in to shop in that area. It doesn't drive any more business for them. So what you want is comps that are close to them. So those are the national tendencies that we're looking at. Incidentally, it's not what the city has provided is not the whole universe of comps either. We're also looking at what has been supplied, so I'm not sure why some of them aren't included, but we're missing from that particular area: Superstore, Winners, Home Depot, Toys R Us, Marshalls, Skechers, HomeSense, H&M. There's a lot more big box there than what is included in the city. So does that change the number? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But in any case, it's not the totality of the universe. Moving on, page 2, Polo Park Shopping Center. Now, it doesn't really get much better in Winnipeg than being located around Polo Park Shopping Center, unless you want to talk about Seasons of Tuxedo, which is brand new and obviously has high rents and is in a premier area of the city as far as incomes, etc. Polo Park is pretty optimal. So when we look at the comps there, they are all either on the site in terms of 23, 24, and 25. Being Marshalls, Mark's Work Warehouse, Bed Bath & Beyond, or they're immediately across the road in that same power center node, that being along St. James Street, or number 26 being the chapters in the development called Polo Festival on the east side of Polo Park Shopping Center. So these rents are necessarily going to be higher because of where they're located. They drive more business because they're in either on Polo Park or surrounding Polo Park. They pay a lot of rent to locate there. They're not going to pay the same rent or anywhere close to the same rent where auto dealers are located. Again, our tenants here: Staples, Ashley, Michaels, Petland, Best Buy, Old Navy, Pro Hockey Life, Save On Foods, Marshalls. You get the idea. I'm not going to run through each of them. Moving on. Page 3, Southwest Winnipeg. This is a bit more spread out, but again, Power Center node and or regional shopping center, if you want to call Grant Park Shopping Center a regional shopping center. So our tenancies are listed there.
Okay, I don't think we need to.
We
I
don't
mean,
need to go through one by one, obviously.
yeah, you've kind of made this point before. We kind of know where these these are.
Okay, great. But it is critical, so I would like the panel to look at them. If you skip forward to page 4, look at where the comps are. And then if you move adjacent to that and northwards, that's where the auto dealers, brand new auto dealers, decided at $13 are located. Not the same thing, not on the same site, not going to drive the same rent. It's all there for you. I'm not going to itemize them, but you can see why we've selected the comps we have versus what the city has as included. That is the rebuttal evidence with regard to the city's lease comparables. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Poole, any questions on the rebuttal?
No, I think that chart helps actually. Like,
Yes,
like when I put the addresses in, like I explained, I did the whole city obviously, and then I isolated regions where the car dealerships are located, and everywhere that you see their clusters, that's where car dealerships are located.
But it's
So,
not. That's the whole point. They're not there.
well, I would disagree, but, I mean, I can go through, but it's up to you. pal.
Okay, would it be fair to say that if you're going to Walmart, you're not going to say, I'm going to drop down to Ford and buy a new truck?
Well, usually if you're looking for a vehicle, Walmart ain't selling it, so I delay
Yeah.
coming with that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Werhun, any questions on the rebuttal?
I don't have, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson.
Also, no questions for me. Thank you, sir.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Well, Mr. Poole, you said you had a hard deadline of 4 o'clock.
Go to 4:30. I have to pick up my son from daycare, but I'll try and get through this as fast as I can.
Yeah.
We have done the other appeal in great detail. I'll simply read in the information. And then,
Okay.
We've done this in the past, Mr. Chair, where we've
yeah,
got through the rest of them in half an hour, so I think we can do it.
I-
Yeah.
Okay, let's
Okay.
do it then. Let's go on to
right.
Unit 20.
roll number 075690333300. Unit 3965 Portage. The 2025 assessment is for $2,134,000. Built in 1999. Has a leasable area of 9,000, little over 9,000 square feet. Page 2 again is the income expense questionnaire. Page 4 is the subject properties photos. On page following pages are the exact same comparables, the exact same order, and the exact same capitalization rate. So I don't think we need to touch base on that. The workup itself. It's on the third last page of the brief. After the order. Page 19. Again, 9,113 square feet with $13.80 applied gives us a PGI of $125,759. 2% vacancy gives us effective gross income of $123,244. Expenses at 3% and shortfall at $6 gives us an NOI of $118,453, capped at 5.55%, gives us our value rounded to $2,134,000. With that, I open questions. All right.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
Single question, cap rate 5.55%. Is that not and I'm just going to say it, you take it as you wish. Is that not a ludicrously low retail cap rate?
I can't comment on that.
Okay.
That's your position.
My only question. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Werhun, any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
Also, no questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no questions. So your presentation, Mr. Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So looking at subject property, unit 20, 3965, this is now a Birchwood credit location. Its history is it was a Saturn dealership. Saturn went out of business in 2007, 2008, somewhere there. Birchwood was unable to draw a major brand to the site. So they themselves, as they owned it, repurposed it as a truck center for a period of time. I don't know if you recall that, or they were just selling trucks out of there. And now it has become Birchwood Credit, where it's essentially a used auto dealer. It is too small for the modern day and age in terms of the size of the structure itself. We're looking at a total of 9,113 square feet. Too small to be a first run auto dealership. It's on a very small site, 1.9 acres. And that is background for you. I will point out, again, you look at the 2023 and 2020 assessments, each of those are under appeal. So when you see our number being 1,226,000, being below the 2023, we were not in agreement with that, and it's under appeal. So that's the gap. We're looking at a significant jump to 2.1 million, 2,134,000 outsize in terms of the marketplace. The photos are there for you. I'm not going to cover any of the same ground. All of the arguments are the same. And you can flip forward to our valuation shown on page number 35. We have used the $12 per square foot rental rate. Really, this becomes a used auto dealer as it has on site. So that again comes down the scale lower in terms of what rent would be paid in the marketplace for something of that as well. All the other things are done in the same manner. We use the same 7.5% cap rate, and this is critical. We look at the text on page 35 there. Last cycle was decided at my 8% cap rate, 4 Point West, and 7.5% for newly built dealerships in Southwest Winnipeg. This cycle, well, the panel hasn't agreed with me exactly. They've used 7.25% on the decisions we had, which are in the addenda for you to see. We are, of course, at 7.5. Certainly, I don't see it being any lower than that. The asset class, the risk involved is going to have a higher cap rate than traditional retail. And the retail that we have is showing that 6.5 to 7.5 range. So 7.5% gives us our value of 1,226,000. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, Mr. Poole?
Thank you.
Okay, Miss Anderson,
No questions, thank you.
Miss Werhan.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, let's go on to unit 40. What happened to unit 30? Unit 40.
Unit 40, roll number is 0756913500. 2025 assessment is for 5,318,000. It's built in 1999. Has 29,060 square feet leasable area. Next two pages over are the IE returned by the owner. And then on page 4 is the subject property photos. We can skip to the page 27 or the third last page of the brief, or fourth last page of the brief. Is the workup. And again, I'm not referencing the comps anymore. You've seen the comps, you've seen the order. We don't need to touch base on that anymore. Given the time of the hearing. On page 27, we see that the 29,060 square feet is applied to $12.35. Again, producing a potential rent of $358,891, with 2% for vacancy gives us a effective gross income of $351,713. Expenses at 3%. Shortfall at $6 gives us a net operating income of $337,675. Capped at 6.35% gives us a value of $5,318,000. And again, this is now, like I was indicating, this is now a 29,000 square foot building. We have a greater size, and our capitalization rates are impacted by size. The higher you go, the more money it is to purchase a property, the less market that you have for it, less competition for it, versus the opposite way when you get down to small sizes like a 9,000 square foot. Many, from a retail perspective, many potential buyers would be competing for that property, and that price would obviously go up. So with that, just wanted to point that out on cap rate. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions.
Okay, Miss Anderson.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Miss Werhan.
No questions, thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Smith, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So unit 40, 3965, we're dealing with the Chevy dealership owned by Birchwood, of course. Background is shown for you on page 3. Again, you can see the prior assessments and the reductions and the appeals to the municipal board for each of these awaiting scheduling, et cetera. So, yes, we're looking at a total of 29,000 square feet for subject property. You can see when it was built and when the addition was put on. That is the background for you. The photos are there for you to see. In terms of the showroom, the majority of it is a little older. You can see the drop T-bar ceiling. In terms of the build out of the property, one thing I didn't cover, which gets spoken about a lot, and I'll keep this to like 30 seconds. Every 7, 10, 8 years, the automobile brands change their package, essentially, their presentation, how they want their dealerships to look. And they force those dealer owners, franchise owners, to redevelop into that style. So they spend a significant amount of money on re-outfitting it to make it look glitzy, whatever they want the new one to be, whether it be that Hyundai fish scale or the Ford Blue Oval, etc. It does not add value in that they don't do more business because it looks different. I've had that discussion directly, again, with not just Birchwood, but other auto dealers as well. It's simply a cost to them. Meets what the dealers want. So that's the background. This one is still looking a little older, if one were to consider that. Anyway, bit of background for you. We can skip forward to the valuation. Capitalization rate was touched on. All of the market, including our stats, is showing you that cap rates are at best 6.5%. Up to 7.5% for non-anchored retail strip malls. So let's look at this in comparison to a retail strip mall. You have multi-tenants, which spreads your risk out. You have smaller units, which are easier to lease, and generally a less volatile asset. So retail strip malls are going to go, as well as more demand, obviously, are going to go for lower cap rates than an asset such as this would, with really only one use and one type of tenant in the theoretical world that you could lease it to an auto dealer. So where should this best be placed? Well, it'll be placed at the top end of that spectrum of cap rates, which is shown by the market as being 7.5%. If we look at my cap rate study, that's generally what it's showing. Outside of the regional shopping center trading in 2023 at 9.13%. I'm not saying that's what it should be.
Okay, we've kind of
But
gone
that's the
over this
background.
before.
So
Yeah, let's.
I will leave it at that. The value that we have based on that analysis, 4,235,000.
Okay, any questions, Mr. Poole?
Oh, I do not. Thank you.
Miss Anderson,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Warehon?
None, thank you.
Okay, I will point out that you got a calculational error here. If your EGI is 335,000 and you're deducting 17 and another 7, that's 24,000. It should, and then another 9,000. It should be 301,000, not 320,000.
Sorry.
You added the 9360 instead of subtracting it.
The 9316. Oh, 9360. Yeah, my apologies. I agree with you. Whatever the figure comes out to,
Okay,
I am fine with.
all right. Okay, let's move on to Unit 45.
Sorry, go ahead.
What's that?
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
Okay, a Unit 45 now, if you can proceed.
Sure.
Preliminary issue, right?
Oh, right.
Yes. So there is late evidence from the assessor on this.
Yep. we do have late evidence. I note that the valuation is less than what it was before, I believe.
Yeah, just so I can clarify to the panel and the agent, I was looking at the way I file this system, the way I filed, I did that last time, obviously. I dropped the wrong file on the email. I sent the 2023 file by mistake. I meant to send the 2025, obviously. But I sent the wrong one by email. So when I was informed this morning by the board that I did have a 2023 file, I immediately sent the 2025 file, so.
Okay. Mr. Smith, do you have any objection to receiving the late evidence?
So I don't necessarily object to it. I'll make one quick point. I've had the same situation arise in cycles past and was not allowed to change my submission. I'm not saying that that should happen today, but I just want it to be the same all the time, right? So.
Yeah, I would say typically, at least from my perspective, if the parties move closer together, I don't mind if they move further apart. It's something
Understood.
else. Yeah. Okay, I guess we gotta take a short recess to decide if the board will accept the late
I'm
evidence.
not objecting, just so you're got that.
Yep, okay. All right, thank you. Welcome back. The board has considered and we will accept the new brief from the city. So Mr. Pohl on the on unit 45.
Okay, roll number is 075691350005, unit 45, 3965 Portage. The 2025 assessed values for 5,017,000. The building was built in 2001. There was an addition put on in 2014. With an effective year built in 2008. And you'll see that from time to time, as you go through these documents, like you'll mark the perspective, when addition will go on, we'll note that. Then we'll have an effective page. So the leasable area is 25,005 square feet. The income and expense questionnaire, if you can look at it, is on page 2 and 3. On page 4 is the subject property that's located with the park. The comps in the order we've already discussed at length, so we're not going through that again. On page 27, we have the workup of the property. 25,025 square feet. We have $13.99 applied to it, which gives us a PGI of $325,075. With the vacancy applied to that, 2% gives us effective gross income of $380,573. Expenses at 3% and $6 per shortfall gives us a net operating income of $306,013, capped at 6.1%, gives us a value at $5,017,000. And with that, questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions.
Okay, Ms. Anderson,
I have no questions. Thank you.
Ms. Werhan.
No, thank you.
All right, now your presentation, Mr. Smith.
Yes, sorry, skipping too fast here. Okay, unit 45. 3965 Portage. This is the Mini/BMW dealership. It's an addition put on as noted in 2014-15. In this particular property, if you look at my page 3, it has a very low land to plan area ratio in terms of an auto dealership. Typically you want 8:1 plus for storage of product and users' cars or clients' cars rather. So that does have an impact. The leasable area as shown, 25,000+ square feet. You can see again the history of the property, the last 3 cycles being in appeal. So our value has increased over time. Just keep that in mind. Our final value is $3,515,000. But again, the prior years are in appeal. Photos are there for you. All of the rest of the material has been dealt with. Cap rates, again, we are not seeing anything in the low 6s or under for superior product and asset class. So we're looking at again, 6.5 to 7.5. Typically, we are at the upper end of that range. Given the asset class and the risk involved, if you were to take this on as a purchase, who are you going to lease it to, and what are they going to be willing to pay? That's all factored in. Using our same 7.5% capitalization rate, as shown on my page 37, you see the summary, $12 per square foot rental rate, 4% vacancy as explained, 5% expense, including the infrastructure costs, and we come to a final market value of $3,515,000. Now you've got me concerned, Mr. Chair, that I have made my spreadsheet rather has not.
This one works out.
Okay, good. That is my presentation. Thank you.
Or at least we made the same error in the spreadsheet. Okay. Any questions, Mr. Pohl?
I do not.
Ms. Werhan,
None, thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
No questions, thank you.
All right, we'll move to Unit 50 then.
Okay, roll number is 075690333600, unit 50. 2025 assessment is for $5,127,000. Built in 2001, addition put on in 2012. We have a leasable area of 27,414 square feet. Again, same as all the other briefs. Page 2 and 3 are the expense questionnaire. Page 4 is the subject property photos. The remainder of the brief is the variables as well as the order. Starting on page 27 is the workup. The $27,414 square feet area. We have $12.52 a square foot applied to it, which gives $343,223 for an effective gross income. Sorry, for potential gross income. For effective gross income, we take away the 2% vacancy, which yields $336,359. 3% for expenses, $6 for shortfall, produces a $322,978 net operating income and capped that at 6.3%, which gives us back to the $5,127,000. With that, again, all the questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson,
Questions, thank you.
Ms. Werhan.
No questions, thank you.
All right, so Mr. Smith, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the property we're dealing with is the Birchwood Nissan Infinity dealership. Look forward to page 3. Again, you can see the background on it, the appeals in place at the Muni Board, and our final market value of $3,814,000, which again has increased over time. The land to plan area ratio for this property again is quite low at a little under 4 to 1, 3.97 to 1 is what we calculated. And that does have an impact on dealership. If you don't have the space to display it, you have to have space somewhere else in order to store those cars, and they're not on site for customers to see and try, etc. Photos again are there for you to see. And this one's a mix. There's a newer portion, which is the Infinity, and the older portion, which is the Nissan. So you can see that there's a bit of a gap between the two in terms of the build out of the showroom retail area. You've got some drop T-bar ceilings there, etc. Everything else remains the same. And if we skip forward to page 37, you can see our summary of valuation alongside the city's $12 per square foot and a 7.5 cap rate, with all of the remainder being done exactly the same. And this gives us our final market value of $3,814,000. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Pohl?
No, I don't.
Okay, Ms. Werhan,
None, thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
None, thank you.
Okay, let's move to Unit 70 then. Mr. Poole on unit 70.
Unit 70. That will be roll number 07569034400. The 2025 assessment is for $6,129,000. It's built in 2005, has a leasable area of 32,903 square feet. And the next two pages are page 2 and 3, the expense questionnaire. Page 4 is the subject property photos. The remainder of the brief is the comparables that we voted and the municipal vote over that we already went over at length. On page 29 is the workup. So for 32,903 square feet, we have $12.50 applied, with for this to be a gross potential gross income of $411,288. With the 2% vacancy applied to that, gives us effective gross income of $403,062. Expenses at 3%, shortfall at $6. Gives a net operating income of $387,022, capped at 6.25%, gives us our $6,192,000.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Werhan.
None, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the Toyota dealership at the Auto Park, unit 70, 3965 Orange Avenue. It used to be Toyota and Lexus. Lexus has moved out of the Auto Park, so that does speak to desirability of the location somewhat. If you flip forward to page 3, again, background on the property. Ownership zoning age, this is one was built in 2004. 32,903 total square feet. You can see the prior assessments there and the reductions and the appeals to the municipal board. Moving forward, you can see photos beginning on page 4, some of the interior as well. Same description of the subject property on pages 6 and 7. Pardon me. The rest of our information remains the same, and I'll ask you to jump forward to page 35. Page 35 has our summary of our valuation alongside the city's 2025 valuation as well as their 2023 valuation. So I haven't pointed this out on all of the others, but it does hold true for each of them. If you look at the city's 2025 valuation, it will be lower than the city's 2023 valuation. Our summary is shown there, $12 per square foot at a 7.5 cap rate. All of the remaining parameters the same. Gives us our final market value of $4,470,000. And as you can see, the city has come closer to what we view as appropriate rental rates for one or two of these properties. That is my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Questions, Mr. Poole?
I do not.
Okay, Ms. Anderson,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Werhan.
None, thank you.
All right. Let me just note 470,000. Okay. So we will move on to unit 75 then.
Okay, roll number is 07569034000, unit 75. 2025 assessment is for $4,572,000. It's built in 1999, addition put on in 2009, with a leasable area of 24,159 square feet. On page 2 and just page 2 is the income expense questionnaire. On page 3 is the photos of the subject property. The remainder of the brief is just the comparables that we already discussed at night. Again, to the order. On page 26, we have the workup for the property. So for 24,159 square feet, we have $12.57, which gives us a $303,679 potential gross income. Apologize, I've been a lot there already. Vacancy at 2% gives us a effective gross income of $297,605. Expenses at 3%, shortfall at $6 gives us a net operating income of $285,778. Capitalization rate is 6.25%, which gives us an estimated value rounded to $4,572,000. With that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions, so thank you.
Okay, Ms. Werhan,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
No questions, thank you.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Smith, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So unit 75, 3965 Portage Avenue is the Honda dealership in the auto park. Page 3 again gives you background on the prior assessments and the reductions and the appeals to the municipal board. So our value should be kept in mind with relation to those each being appealed to the municipal board. Built in 99 with an addition in 2009. We have again a very low land plan area ratio at 4.53 to 1, so almost half of what you would typically look for in a new build auto dealership. Not enough space for car display, storage, circulation, etc. 24,159 total square feet. Photos begin on page 4 of the interior, all of which I have taken myself for each of these properties. Description of the property begins on page 7 and 8. The remainder of the information remains the same, and our summary is shown on page 36 this time. And again, we have our valuation for the 2025 cycle alongside the city's 2025 valuation and their 2023 valuation. So you can see the gaps there. $12 per square foot, 7.5 cap. The remainder of the parameters remain the same as shown, and it produces our final market value of $3,290,000. The fine, I know the city has to do their model in some fashion, and it makes fine adjustments. You're really not going to see the very fine adjustments that are being shown here between a 24,000 and a 27,000 square foot building, all other things being equal. So one thing to keep in mind there. And we are not seeing capitalization rates drop as of the valuation date, certainly. So what we do see is the city dropping their cap rates significantly for this cycle. So that is my valuation. Again, 7.5 cap is, if anything, probably being slightly generous. So our final market value, $3,290,000. Thank you.
All right, questions, Mr. Poole?
I don't have any, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Werhan.
None, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson.
And thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. We will move on to unit 90.
Unit 90, roll number 0756903380. The 2025 assessed value is $6,547,000. It was built in 1999, addition put on 2017. It is approximately 33,959 square feet. On the next page is the income expense questionnaire. Page 2, and on page 3, we will have a little bit of pause on this one because we do have a sale. Part of
Okay.
the research is to look into a sale. Page 3 shows that October 6th, 2022, the property was purchased for 14,250,000. Sworn value at that as well. So right away, I'll look into that. There's very few sales. I should say there's no renting, and there's isolated sales that you do see. This is one of them. So on page 4 and 5 is article on the sale indicating that Birchwood purchased the remainder, the one that they did not own in the park. And that they bought a collision center along with it. My natural check was, did they buy the collision center that was in the park? But obviously they own it already. It's not. So they didn't buy that one. They bought one inclusive of this out in Headingley. It's just a little bit past the park. So when I looked at it, I tried to verify everything that I could. On page 6 shows the status of instrument. Date is right. They purchased it for 14,250,000. We see that everything is in line. When we go along to page 8 or page, I should say the status of titles, we see what they bought. It's showing that their Unit 9 condominium plan, and then of course they have the residual of the common area, 12% approximately. So that's what they inclusive of the sale. When we look over to page 10, we look at the registered mortgage on this property alone, this parcel. At 11,400,000, that's right in line with commercial mortgage. You're paying around 30%, 20% down, and you get your mortgage for the rest of it. All right. Well, then we go over to page 12, we see again confirmed the parties that were involved from Auto Vision Instruments, purchased by BAG, the real estate, which is obviously Birchwood on board group. We see the registration number. We move over to the land transfer documents, same registration number. And I'm going through this looking to ensure that what was purchased, what is being reflected in the subject property here. So we see that it's condominium, we see that it's Auto Vision on page 13. We go over to page 14, we see again the exact same interest, no other interest, there's no other lands, there's no other parcel. Being the collision center that was purchased at the same time. Is this an individual price? Did that include? It looks and appears to be that is specific to the subject property. We see on page 5 again, consideration paid 14,250,000. And then it was prepared by Goodmore Riley. As we continue along to page 16, we see that the corporation, the transferee, obviously BAG to the state. We go over to page 17 where they declare what the fair market value was. Fair market value was declared to be 14,250,000. So I then looked into who compared it. Was it properly reviewed? And obviously when you see it on as such, the documents as such, you're going to have legal counsel review it. Owner signatures, both vendor and purchaser, and legal consultants on the next few pages. And then we see on page 22 the legal counsels involved, their experienced personnel. So at the end of the day, this sale looks like it's $14.25 million for this property. It includes the real estate only. Didn't include any of the going concern inventory. Didn't include the collision center that was bought at the same time, but it is a separate purchase onto that. With that, I have to bring it to the board's attention and review it in full. So and that's what I've done. So on the remaining page, on page 24, subject property photos on 24 and 25. And then past that, the remainder of the brief is the exact same. Those are comps of that, rents. So comps of that. Order and starting on page 27. We work up. And we see that it's 33,959 square feet at $12.70, which is PGI of $431,279. 2% for vacancy gives us effective gross income of $422,653. 3% for expenses, 6% for shortfall gives us a net operating income of $405,898. And capped at 6.2% leads us back to $6,547,000. So obviously there's a discrepancy between the price paid and our model. But we're still, again, we're with the model here today. And with that, I'll open the questions.
Okay, Mr. Smith, questions?
Yes, I do have questions. So I'll try and keep it concise. Number one, did you interview anybody from Winnipeg Auto Group with regard to the sale?
No, I did not.
Did you interview anybody from the vendor?
No,
Okay, so you don't have that insight then.
I did speak with you prior to the submittal of evidence. I wanted to double verify this.
Spoke to me. Yes. You recall what I told you?
You said it was not correct.
Correct. Okay, so that's one question. So number two, looking at you're assuming that is a valid sale representative simply of the real estate component, correct?
Everything is indicating that.
So if you take that sale figure and do the math, does it in any way coincide with any prior transaction that you've seen on the marketplace?
I haven't seen recent automotive car dealerships sold. I have ones from 16 around there.
So
but this is
those,
several years past.
yes, there's a bit of a gap, but is it not something like 2+%, 100%
Let me
higher?
be clear, it may be pause, hence the conversation, hence the question.
Right,
That's why I wanted to verify with you, the ownership group, what actually was purchased here. That's why I went through the documents that I brought in.
yes, but you did not interview the participants in the after me providing you background information, correct?
No, I did not.
Okay, not that you necessarily have time to do that.
No, and that's part of call, just to clarify for the board, when we're dealing with a number of appeals, a number of dockets, in fairness to the due process that has to occur. It's very difficult to do that in the times that we have to submit evidence, hence the call, hence the review of the documents. And I was hoping that if there was anything out of line that we would have received a statement from the owner that this was wrong, or that's wrong.
Similarly, we don't have time to go through that exercise on speculative nature that we might need to provide it. If you go through this exercise of providing all of the detail with regard to land transfers, et cetera, right? We don't know what you're going to provide. We don't necessarily need to go beyond that when we know the background of it. So third question, typically in past cycles, you've provided transactions that have happened and sale price per square foot, et cetera. Those have typically been disproven as not being representative of strictly real estate, correct?
There was 2 purchase agreements. Obviously, they were renting and they wanted to test the market before they moved into purchasing for 2 particular properties. And I had some rudimentary direct sales comparisons to use. But those sales are getting very dated. So
Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Werhan.
None, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith, your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So let's deal with the sale up front, as obviously it's the most critical component. Please don't. This is not a sale of the auto dealership on its own. It's not free of business value as well. So to speak to that, and I will point you to the city's page number 4. with the article from Industry News and a move that has another dealership. And a collision repair center to the growing Birchwood Automotive Group. Company announced purchase of Winnipeg Dodge Chrysler Limited. So Winnipeg Dodge Chrysler had two assets. Those assets were the Unit 90 dealership that we're dealing with here, as well as 5236 Portage Avenue, which is in the RM just outside of the city on Portage Avenue. It is a collision center. So the price paid includes that property as well. Again, I'm under oath. I speak. I have interviewed directly essentially the chief operating officer of the holding company for Bag Real Estate and the other family businesses who was directly involved in the transaction and is obviously aware of all of the details. The price that is mentioned there is inclusive of both properties, and the collision center isn't a tiny little collision center. It's a brand new, very large collision center on Portage Avenue in Headingley, as well as reflecting elements of business components as well, as all of these transactions do on the marketplace. So please do not get it in your mind that the 4 million, 14 million plus, whatever the figure is in any way indicative of what the real estate value of the property is. Two properties as well as business components. So it's not that the city is being generous by valuing it at 6.5 million when it sold for 14.5. That's not that is not a real estate value. I don't know what more to tell you other than having that individual here or a statement from them, but it's not accurate. So that is the background on that. If one were to look at the figure that would result in on a per square foot basis, it would be so much greater than any transaction that one would see in the marketplace. It becomes very obvious that that is not what was paid for the real estate. So that's the background. Moving forward, we're now looking at the Birchwood Chrysler Dodge location in the city, Unit 90, 3965 Portage. And background shown on page 2023. Unit page 3, 2023 assessment is shown there for you as well, since they've owned it, was reduced, is appealed to the municipal board or by ourselves as well as the city, I believe in that case, our value obviously under that. Property was built in 99 with a slight addition in 2016. This is actually one of the older properties in terms of the build out and the finishes inside of it, which you'll see inside. So it's not that it's, you know, been greatly upgraded or anything like that. It would be, in my opinion, probably one of the lower grade properties in the auto park. Photos begin on page 4. Again, you can see the drop T-bar ceilings, which is contrasting significantly with what you see in modern auto dealerships. A lot of office space, mezzanine office space as well. There's a bridge that is located within the front area. It's generally a very choppy dealership overall in the way that it's been laid out and used over time. So there's that background. Photos continue through page 9 when you get into the repair area. Obviously, it's very different from the front end of the building. So moving forward into the valuation itself, my summary is on page number 37, and we've applied the $12 rental rate to the property. Again, we're looking at just under 34,000 square feet here. We're not making minute adjustments to the rental rate that would be appropriate for this. You can see the city's rental rate has dropped significantly from 2023, and their cap rate has gone down as well. We don't see drops in cap rate as of the valuation date, certainly with the rise in interest rates and lending rates. So $12 per square foot rental rate, 7.5% cap rate. produces our final market value of $4,659,000. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Poole?
Just not necessarily in your brief. I just want to touch on the sale, obviously. It's not in your brief, correct? Sale.
Doesn't appear to be, no.
Why would you not reconcile the sale, approaching a reference date? If it was 2 parcels,
Because we were going to speak to it as in giving our evidence here today.
given that you had conversations with the property owner, and this was at play, why would we not have an email, a signed statement, indicating a correction to? Because I see 2 seasoned lawyers reviewing it, and for fair market value, just so we're clear, that is only for the land, and you pay tax based on the land transfer. So you're saying that they were willing to pay tax on the goodwill, the going concerns?
You're getting outside of the bounds of what we're discussing here. I mean, there are allocation issues, et cetera, that I'm not going to delve into nor pretend to know all of the details of, but I have had the direct conversation. You and I spoke about this, so I've communicated to you what I've communicated today, that it involves both business as well as 2 properties, so I didn't see the need to additionally provide backup info on it if we were going to talk about it in the hearing.
Okay, that's all I was saying. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Ms. Werhan?
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
No questions, thank you.
All right, let's move on to our last unit, number 100. So, Mr. Poole.
Unit 100, roll number 07569033900. 2025 assessed values for $5,521,000. Actual year built is 2000. Leasable area is 30,104 square feet. On page 2 and 3 are the expense questionnaires. On page 4 is the subject property photos. The remainder of the brief is the same comparables that we've always spoken to from the municipal board. So we can turn to page 27. Page 27 is the workup. It's for 30,144 square feet applied to $12.36. We have a PGI of 372,580. We have a vacancy applied to that at 2%, which gives us effective gross income of 365,128. We have a 3% expenses and $6 shortfall gives us a net operating value or net operating income of $350,557. Capped at 6.35% gives us a rounded value of $5,521,000. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions, thank you.
All right, Ms. Werhan?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
No questions, thank you.
All right, so Mr. Smith, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So unit 100 is now Birchwood Kia West dealership. Background on the property, this used to be a Chevrolet dealership. There's actually 2 in the mall at one point. This was a different ownership group way back in time. And the consolidation that we've spoken about in our description of the auto industry happened. Only one could stay. That ended up being unit 40, I believe it is. And this one had to be shuttered. So as owner and partial, they were majority owner, I believe. Birchwood was tasked with getting a new brand in there. Could not do it for considerable period of time. So they, as owners of majority of the properties in the park, they made use of the site for storage of vehicles. They may have done some service in there, but they did not have an operating brand for, I don't have the figure, but it was a good period of time. It took them quite a while to get Kia to go in there. Now it's a Kia dealership. So that speaks to the detail that I provided you in our commentary earlier. Page 3 gives us background again on the property. 2020 and 2023 assessments, both reduced and both appealed to the municipal board. Built in 99, 2000. Again, this is one of the older ones. Been slightly updated with some Kia branding to the front, but they've kind of gone light on that. Frankly, representative of their probably position in the hierarchy of auto dealerships, so they don't spend a huge amount on things like that. 30,000 plus square feet. And all of our information remaining the same. Our summary is on page number 36. And you can see our valuation alongside the city's 2025 and 2023. You can see the, again, significant drop in rental rate that the city has used and the decrease in cap rate at a time when we're not seeing decreases in cap rates for this asset class, certainly. So $12 rental rate, 7.5% cap rate gives us our final market value of $4,111,000. Thank you very much.
Okay, questions, Mr. Pohl?
I don't, thank you.
Ms. Werhan,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
No questions, thank you.
All right, we've made it through. We did speed through the last ones. So
There you
thank you
go.
very much, gentlemen, for your time. We have now heard all the properties on today's agenda, and this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank
So
you.
once again, thank you very much.
Appreciate your time and your patience, everybody. Have a great night.
Okay, and we will have a short dignity break, then we'll come back and make our decisions.